Booby Trapped. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Laser Everything Round 2. We're here live today, and we're going to be doing more laser stuff that you guys like to see, like lenses and lasers and things. So, yeah, we had some audio issues. We're back. Welcome back. We had a bunch of questions lined up before we cut off last time, so I want to start with those. Kyle went ahead and preserved those questions for us. So if you want to start with those, Kyle, I think that would be a good way to kick this off, just so we can get to people's questions. And then from there, we'll kind of work into, the other things that we're doing today. Also, hi, Anthony.
Yo. Glad I made it. Good to have you.
Yeah, we start.
So
it's all you, Kyle.
First question I preserved. These are not in order by any means. But TJ Michael said, question. Would a Haotian 60-watt Mopa be a quality buy for a first fiber laser? So you have a lot of options, right? There are a lot of good options on the market. There are also a lot of crappy options on the market, and it depends on what you're looking for. Haotian has made some awesome products. I have their CO2 Galvo and their UV. Matt has fiber, a CO2, and a UV from them. And a lot of people in the community have theirs. We've also tested Wisely, Mactron, Makira, CommMarker, SFX, BY Laser, Lasers Only. For some reason, my brain wants to call it Only Lasers, but that's backwards. I feel like I'm forgetting one. Alex, help me out.
Mactron?
Mactron's
SFX?
in there. Yeah. SFX, yep. Oh, maybe I did get them all. So in terms of what we've tested in-house amongst the crew, right? A lot of those are already on the buying guide, or we've done videos on the channel. I can't speak for every brand, right? But in terms of Haotian, yeah, they're totally fine. In terms of the sample size that we have from them across the entire crew, between paid for lasers, like Matt paid for every single one of his lasers, and the lasers that were sent over to me for testing, we have a big sample size from them, and none of them have had any serious problems and any questions or anything work-wise that needed to be done on them. They honored, and their customer service has been great. So I would say, yeah, that's a good option. Long story short, if you're going to get a quote from them, I would also suggest getting a quote from at least one or two other brands that are good brands, just so you have a sample size and you can say, okay, I want this and I don't want this. And it gives you both a price point, delivery time frame, and a feature set that you can compare between to decide what's important to you and what's not important to you. So there you go. We do have a coupon code, which is also our affiliate code, which is LEYT24. And it should save you some money or get you an add-on or something like that. I believe it's 100 or something off, or 200. I don't know. Use that coupon code. It'll save you some money, and it'll also help support the channel if you do buy from them. Next question is from David. Says, question, is there a location where I could find all the fixtures available for my fiber laser? Thanks. This is a tough one. So there are a lot of products out there that you could mark. There's a lot of shapes and sizes and fitments and different materials that those jigs could be made out of even. So it really depends on what you're looking for and what your price point is. There's been a huge boom to this side of laser engraving in terms of fixtures and jigging in the last, I would say, year and a half. And you have a lot of options. Check out Etsy. And actually, I think we have a link to a couple of them in the buying guide. But there's good ones, there's better ones, and then there's crappier ones. And it really depends on what you want. Also, do you want just a fixture table that you can fixture pins into place and swap stuff out quickly one by one? Do you want a rotary fixture where you can load it up with 4, 5, 10, 20 things at a time, have it rotate through them all, and then you reload it so you have a couple minutes of downtime in between batch runs while it runs? Or do you want a flat fixture that you could maybe cut out yourself on a CO2 laser? There's so many options there. We do have some videos on the channel between fixture tables. So from like Blackwell Engineering or Silent Manufacturing, which we also have links for on the buying guide, I believe. We have some fixtures and jigs for specific products that we listed on the buying guide that we've tried out. And then there are so many that have been added to Etsy or standalone stores online in the last couple of weeks or even months. Just because of the holiday season and coming up, people prepping. So you're going to have to spend some time looking through, seeing exactly what you need and want, and determine what works best for your workflow. Check out the videos on the channel for the different fixture styles, and that can help you work through maybe what you need or want for what you need to get done. Martin says, do you have experience with Maxtron in the long term or any other Chinese manufacturer in marking 8+ hours continuously every day?
I mean, I don't think I've done 8+ hours continuously every day, but I've used my machines a lot for a very long time.
Yeah, I would say I mean, I've used lasers in my shop for more than 8 hours at a time, but not typically the same laser running for over 8 hours at a time.
Yeah.
I've definitely hit like the 6-hour mark, particularly with doing back-to-back coins. But typically I have a break in there where I stand up, I want to go touch grass or get food or maybe poop. And I do not walk away with the laser running. So
the big concern is like heat, right? Since we're dealing mostly with electronics here. So if you have good airflow after 3 hours, your laser isn't on fire, like from just being super hot, then I don't think 8 hours is going to be the breaking point, So I think like if you have a unit, any unit from any company that provides efficient enough airflow that it's staying cool after even an hour of continuous use, I can't imagine that's going to suddenly change unless you pump it full of dust and dirt, So I would say follow all the normal precautions. Keep the laser off the ground, make sure you're in a well-ventilated area, keep it away from contaminants. And, if it does a good job once for a limited longer run, then it's going to do a good job indefinitely. It's no different than a computer or a laptop in that sense. As long as it's staying cool, it should just keep doing what it's doing. That's my understanding of it anyway.
Yep, absolutely.
And if you're running in like a manufacturing environment or something, which kind of sounds like that's what the question's in reference to, is like you're going to do like high output manufacturing, just account for the fact that something's going to fail eventually. It's probably not going to be the laser source because those are rated at like 100,000 hours, but you never know. So just check the warranty. If it has a good warranty, then run it. And then eventually maybe a power supply, I think is probably the most common thing that's going to go out. And you're talking $40-$50,
Absolutely.
That's after the warranty expires. So, I mean, as long as you get a good source, and if you're like in a manufacturing environment, then I think you're just going to have to account for something is going to wear out, but it's probably not going to be the source. So just, keep that in mind. And be prepared. Maybe have a power supply or two on hand. The high voltage and the low voltage power supplies. That way, if something does go wrong, you're looking at a limited amount of time being down and not manufacturing. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good advice. I mean, even like having, if you're really doing a lot of stuff and it's constant, even an extra scan head, I'd say, like if you're going to be doing that kind of work and you're worried about something moving out, I would be targeting the moving parts, right? Of course, power supplies are just like infinitely unreliable, and that's something that we coach people to replace all the time to resolve their issues. But if I was looking at something to fail, if I had to make a guess, it would be the part of the machine that moves. That kind of stuff always goes first under heavy use, right? So I'd say have some replacements with the thing that actually has motors in it. Like that would probably be a good idea. Scan heads are not that expensive. They're like $300 to $500 depending on what you get. Maybe cheaper, maybe a little more expensive. It depends on your system. But they're not so cost prohibitive that having an entire new one ready to go is not possible. I think that's possible for most people, especially if you're doing high loads. That would be what I would be looking out for.
Yeah,
it's good.
Depending on
definitely.
Oh, go ahead.
I'll just say you can definitely have one on hand. They're not, like Alex said, they're not that expensive, and they're an easy. So you don't even have to go to your machine for that. So
depending on your workflow too, and how mission critical that marking station is, some companies, if they're big enough and doing enough production, will just keep a spare machine tested and ready to go with the same specs as the first machine, and they'll just swap it so they can troubleshoot it while the production is still going. But yeah, TLDR, back to the buying guide, check out the channel for all the brands we've tested, and those are going to be the same brands that we would suggest to you, because we have tested pretty much all of what we have tested on the channel now for a year or longer each at this point. Maxtron, Alex has been running for years now. I've been running my Wisely for years now. The youngest machine in my shop at this point is 1.5 years old in terms of fiber lasers. So, Jonathan says, how is material supposed to look and sound under correct settings? Anneal, mark, and cut. Cutting 26 gauge stainless steel for ornaments. Lots of noise, question mark. Giant fountain of speakers. I think he meant sparks. Or small scattering of sparks. So a lot of it has to do with the amount of heat and the amount of energy that you're dumping into the material, and what the engrave or cut or anneal result is that you're getting per pass, and how much heat you're dumping into it. So if you're cooking the material and you're warping the hell out of it, you're probably going at it way too aggressively. So you need to tune something back in order to reduce that heat load. If you're just burning the surface, literally charring it to the point where you're doing too much to the surface at once, even if it isn't warping, again, you're just being too aggressive. Typically when I'm doing stuff, any kind of tuning, I'm looking for quality at the end without having to do a ton of post-processing, because ultimately if it's getting done on the laser well the first time, usually it's going to mean a time and cost savings somewhere else, because I don't have to babysit it while it's on the laser doing batch running. But I might have to babysit it while I'm sanding off the edges manually. So depending on your workflow and what it is you're doing, I would tune the settings back to the point where I usually err on the side of caution, and I'll do a little bit less sparks. I don't tune it based on sparks, is I guess what I'm saying. So if you're getting so many sparks coming off of it that material is just flying everywhere, that's probably a good indication that you're overdoing it. But you are going to want to see sparks. It's just a matter of not overdoing it.
Yeah, if I can do a deep engraving on a coin to the depth that I want, and I can do it in 10 minutes with dozen passes, or I could do it in 30 minutes with 50 passes, I'm going to do it in 30 minutes every time, because you're just going to have so much of a closer to done thing that comes off the laser bed, and I can spend that time with it running doing other things to work on my business, and if you're really so busy that you cannot afford the extra time on the laser, it might be time to consider getting another.
Yeah, a second laser. It's kind of, in that way, we're very akin to the 3D printing world, where sometimes it's far more efficient to get a second machine rather than a single faster machine. But hope that helps. David says, question, is there a location where I can find all the fixed... Oh, I read that one already. Yeah, all right, we're done.
Nice, that was fast. And then we have a couple in actual chat now.
Yep. So Jonathan says, adding to my previous question, how do companies like Metal Earth get such clean cuts in their metal? Is it possible on a galvo fiber or only on industrial gantry fiber? So Metal Earth, I think, if I'm remembering, they sell those like 3D models of cutouts, like the assembly dinosaur puzzle kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
So
cool.
Yeah, if I'm remembering correct, and John, please correct me if I'm wrong in chat, but you can get stuff like that on a galvo. The problem is when you're piecing pieces together like that kind of have to be dimensionally accurate. When you're cutting them on a galvo, you're almost always going to have a beveled edge. And by beveled, I mean you're going to have an angle to the cut, even if it's not perceptible to you. And focus is going to be very, very important, because if you're up or down a couple of millimeters and you're not consistent with your focus, the problem is that you're effectively cutting something with a projector. And if you can visualize pulling a projector further from a wall, you're going to be expanding the entire thing, like scaling it up. And if you're off on that sizing on one piece and the rest you're off in the other direction, making it smaller by getting closer, it can create a problem with fitment. But anyways, with cutting with a galvo, depending on the thickness of the material, you're going to end up with a tapered edge, I should say. And you can also end up with slag if you're too aggressive, or dross, or there's so many terms that people call it these days, but metal boogers flying back and sticking to your piece it is not ideal.
Exactly the way I was going to describe it.
Yeah, and typically when it comes to cutting, because galvo lasers are not really efficient at cutting, people try and rush through and speed up a cut, and you end up with all these little metal boogers and artifacting in the surface that you have to go back and file down or post-process. It's just, they're not ideal. Can you do it? Yes, if you're reasonable with the thickness of material, but it's not ideal. It's kind of a pain. It's more of a workaround than a proper tool for that.
You're using a pair of pliers as a hammer.
Yeah, that's a fair analogy there.
It's a tool, it's just not the right one.
Yeah, so you can do it. It's probably going to take some time to get yourself tuned in on that. If you're doing nothing but metal cutting and all you want to do is make those, the right tool for the job is a fiber cutter, or even like a plasma and a sanding table or something. Could you please explain cutoff frequencies on a Mopa laser and if it is typical? So
It's just the name. So
the cutoff frequency, think of it this way. A pulse width, because your cutoff frequency is based on your pulse width and a bunch of other factors. So your pulse width is how long every pulse of the laser lasts. Your frequency is how many pulses per second there are. So those two things kind of work cohesively together. When you have those two things, the laser essentially has to do something to protect it from sending way too much power down the line and damaging itself or being inconsistent. So what the laser company does is they set a cut-off frequency. So essentially, if you're too low in frequency, the laser will protect itself or work to keep itself more consistent by not sending full power down the line. So that's what it's cutting off power. So if you have a pulse width of, say, 200 on a 60 watt Mopa M7, your cutoff frequency for that is, I think, like 37 or 45 or something like that. So if I were to put in 25 frequency at 200 pulse width, it's going to reduce the power percent on the hardware side in order to both protect itself and keep the power output consistent, so it's not all over the place or damaging itself. Going over that frequency means it can send full power down the line, but when you go really high in frequency, you're kind of artificially dumping your how aggressive you are being anyway, so it's going to feel lighter.
Yeah.
So it just depends. It's a balance, but I hope that explanation helps you.
When we were talking about metal cutting, you guys touched on like literally how many more watts of fiber laser gantry has, right?
No, we didn't. But
they're just straight up like
yeah,
so much more powerful. I just wanted to throw that in. I was helping
wattage.
Rhiannon and move on to the next step of this. But instead of like counting your power in watts, you're counting it in kilowatts with fiber cutters, and that raw power to be able to punch through something really makes a huge difference as far as getting cuts. Also, gantry fibers are typically gas assisted. Did we touch on that?
no, that's a good point as well.
That's a huge difference too. You've got gas assist, high pressure, nitrogen, and oxygen, depending on what you're cutting, that help keep that slag moving in a downward direction away from the material of the laser itself. And then finally, because the gantry is a gantry, your laser beam is always shooting directly down at the exact area on the cutting surface it's trying to cut, which is also a huge deal. So there's a lot of factors. I really think fiber gantry machines are very, very different from the galvo fibers that we use on a day-to-day. They use a completely different software suite, and they just have so many differences. I think the wavelength of light coming out of it is one of the only common factors between the two. So while you can get away with it with a fiber galvo on thin, small projects, they're very different machines made for very different purposes. I just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I guess the other thing too is you could overpower a galvo. Like there are 500 watt fiber galvos out now. But the problem with that is even if you're cutting with that much power, you're never going to be able to effectively use it. Because the problem with that is you have no gas assist, you have no airflow. So you're not actually moving the material away in an effective way without damaging the rest of the surface. So you could mitigate some of that by trying to fix it, but you're not fixing it. You're just spending more money on a laser at that point that you can't get the full value out of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know they had 500 watt ones. That's crazy.
Oh,
I saw
dude,
a picture Pascal showed of the
now.
200 watt, and it has like liquid cooling lines to the galvo head and stuff. So I can't even imagine what a 500 watt would need.
Don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure that GZ Tech, who sent me that 80 watt GM source, I'm pretty sure they make 1,000 watt, like kilowatt pulsed fiber sources, which is pretty nuts.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's wild. Is there anything you wanted to touch on, Alex, or should I keep knocking out questions?
Yeah, I mean, if you guys are watching the screen, I don't know how easy it is to see or how our quality is coming through right now, but Rhiannon is in the process of making the adjustments for our second Ronar Smith 110 millimeter lens. So that'll be 2 of 4 110 millimeter lenses that we are making corrections for today. I'm super proud she's doing it all on her own. She needs very little feedback from me. So even after just her like hardcore dunked in the pool lesson she got yesterday, she's catching right on and getting it done. So I'm just monitoring her while reading chat and listening to you guys answer questions. And I'm kind of bopping back and forth between everybody, making sure things keep going smooth. So that's my update. That's what I'm doing. But no, not particularly.
Nice.
Yeah, if you guys want to see anything in particular, let me know too. You can let me know in chat. If you would rather see the close-up laser view, the workspace view, we have Rhiannon's laptop on a feed, which you are seeing here right now. All of that stuff, I can hop back and forth between those things as needed. So just let me know, and I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah. We got a good question here from Sis Guy that says, what type of laser would you recommend for doing nothing but tumblers? If you are marking powder-coated tumblers and that is your business model, that is your thing, you're doing hundreds of tumblers and maybe some cutting boards, or even thousands of tumblers a day, CO2 Galvo is the move. Especially if you're doing one-sided engravings and not full wraps. But even if you're doing full wraps, you're still going to save some time probably. So you could knock out a single-sided engrave on a tumbler in like a minute and a half or less, depending on the design. Or I've done a full wrap in as little as 6 minutes. And that was a fairly detailed, complex design.
I just published an episode from Matt on this topic exactly.
True.
I think it's called "What's the Best Laser for Tumblers in 2024." So if you haven't seen that episode from Matt yet, please go watch it. It's still on the front page of the channel. It's very easy to find. You navigate to the channel, and we go into detail about everything that Kyle's bringing up right now. It's a really good episode. It's funny, it's engaging, and it's pretty quick. And it covers the basics about these things that you need to know. So definitely check that one out if you haven't already seen it.
I just put it into chat if you want to grab that link and favorite it for later to loop back to it. And is there a brand that you recommend? Mine's from Haoshin. Alex's CO2 Galvo is from Mactron.
We have a ton of companies that we trust at this point. SFX makes really good machines, so you can check those out. Yep, head to the buying guide. We don't have every laser from every company on the buying guide, but if we review one pretty well, we usually have a good standing with those companies and are monitoring their customer service that they're distributing and things like that to make sure that their customers stay happy, especially on the Laser Master Academy, where people are giving us constant feedback. So if we ever heard something, extremely negative about a company or a really bad experience, those buying guide slots are always up for being taken down. It's not something that's just up there statically as an advertisement. If they're still up, it's because we like them. CommMarker's also got some interesting stuff out right now that we haven't used specifically, but we have used CommMarker machines, and I think we're still friendly with them as a company. We like them, right, Kyle?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So they have some smaller CO2 Galvos out as well right now that might be worth checking out too. So there's a big list.
I believe the one that they're running right now, I think, is using a 4x expander on I think it's the 38 watt Davi tube. And it's a pretty good budget option. The problem, and I'll say this as a blanket statement, the problem with CO2 Galvo, the complexity that's added with going that type of machine, is in the hardware configuration. And usually you want to get that sorted before you purchase it. And the reason why I say that is the hardware configuration significantly affects your dot size, which will affect your beam and your quality of engraving, because it's going to affect the dot size at focus, the physical DPI that you could reproduce with the laser. So for example, I have an 8x expander, which, think of it like a focusing lens before it gets to the focusing lens. It's adjusting the beam size to be bigger so that when it goes into the back of the housing of the lens for focus, the bigger beam going in, the smaller the dot at focus. And you also need to have a laser head with mirrors that can handle that bigger beam. And you also need to have a lens housing for your lens that, or I should say an input aperture on the back of your lens that's big enough to accept that larger beam as well. There's a lot of steps in the staircase when it comes to configuring that. Hayocean's default configuration is a either whatever laser tube, an 8x expander, a 20 millimeter head, and an appropriate lens that will accept the beam. Mactron also has their tuning. They've been tuning their machines for years, and they've been working on their configuration. Have they moved up to an 8x expander, or are they sticking with the 6x?
I think after my feedback, I believe that they did, but I can't confirm that right this second. So I would definitely reach out to whoever you are curious. You're good to move on if you don't do the red dot, or the scale test rather. Whoever you end up going with, make sure that you have that conversation explicitly. I'd also like to recommend, and we bring this video up every single time we go live, guys. I would also like to recommend going and watching Everything You Need to Know About Galvo Lasers, in which we scrape the surface of this particular topic. There is a section dedicated to CO2 galvo lasers and the intricacies that make them stand apart from their CO2 and fiber cousins. And if you want to start dipping your toes into that water and start learning about how those configurations are going to affect your machine and the final outcome of the marks that you're able to get with it based on its configuration, that video is excellent. It's an excellent watch. You can find it in a ton of our playlists, including our Liper and Crash Course guides. And it's very, very good. So please go watch that video. Everything you need to know about galvo lasers. It would be a substantial aid to you on this topic, especially because it's formatted better. There's graphics, there's visuals, and I think it's more engaging than you're probably going to get from the live stream here with us today. So I really recommend going and watching that if you haven't seen it already.
Yeah, it's that video is in the front spot of basically all of our crash course guides playlists. So if you have any of those favorited, go to the first video and it'll be that one. But hope that helps. And if you get stuck in the configuration or you're having trouble deciphering when you're comparing your quotes, jump into any one of our communities and make a thread. That is the best way to get feedback, is getting an organized post put up on one of the communities. Dark Matter says, got an order for metal gift cards using code 3 of 9 barcode. I was able to follow your guys' tutorial, both variable text and barcode. However, when I scan the code, it's coming up with random numbers. And then instead of the assigned numbers, I think it's a problem with how it's reading, because test in Lightburn shows the right number. So if you're using the font for code 3 of 9, that could be the font itself. So if I'm not mistaken, one of the code 3 of 9s that I tested, it had different results for capitals versus lowercase, and it wasn't outputting the correct thing. So double check the font itself if you're doing that. That's the best tip I got at the moment.
I also don't think code 39. I think code 39 is the one that requires asterisks at the beginning and end of a sequence of numbers.
Yeah.
So code 3 of 9 certainly does not put those in for you. Lightburn won't either if you're just using it as a font. So make sure that the first character and the last character are an asterisk. Do some research, confirm that. Don't take my word for it. That's just off the top of my head. But I'm fairly sure that you do require the asterisks in order for those codes to be read appropriately. So that is something you're going to want to make sure that you do. Again, confirm the details, but I'm pretty sure that is the case and could be throwing off how the reader is perceiving the numbers that you're printing.
Good catch on that. Resin says, "Hey guys, working and lurking. Good to see you. Hope you're doing good. Hope you're having a good day. If you're still in the meeting, I wish you good luck." Jeremias, any tips into engraving photos in precious metals? Can I polish it after to make it shiny? I'm brand new to this. Just got a 60-watt fiber laser last week. We have a video on the channel. We have a couple videos on the channel around photos in particular, but Alex has done photos on stainless, silver, and gold, if I'm not mistaken. And the process that he uses, he puts a base layer into the metal, and then he puts, as a base layer, he uses that to give it both a matte texture and to remove any resistance to the metal accepting the photo engraved for all the details. And then he puts a darker tone into that base layer in order to get the photo to pop. If you're polishing it, the problem is polishing can sometimes remove that surface mark. So you can test it. I don't know if we've ever tried polishing something we've marked like that.
Yeah, I mean, we've had this conversation a couple times on the channel, and you can't, I think, inherently due to the nature of a laser and what it's doing to the material, you can't really polish with it. I would recommend.
Oh no, I think he means post-process polish it after he marks it.
Oh, for sure.
Like put a photo into it and then polish it. Yeah, I would say give it a try.
But give it a try, yeah, sure. Yeah, you can stick with the hundreds going forward, I think, based on what Kyle said yesterday. Yeah, you can skip the 50s.
If you
which is nice because I don't.
Oh, okay. If you haven't done a photo on the material that you're looking to do it on, depending on what it is, if it's gold, if it's silver, if it's steel, check out those videos on the channel. Just search for photo. It'll be probably one of the first 5 or 6 results. I would go through all of those videos because the science that's covered in the earlier videos is specific to really good specifics to the materials and the process that he uses for putting in a base layer. And then the photo guide is really great for reproducing photos using dithering and the science behind line interval and reproducible DPI. So hope that helps. Anywhere I can find printer settings for portrait to metal etching in different types of metals. Portrait to metal etching. We don't really do printers here, but we do lasers. Unless you mean print as in laser, like Glowforge print in terms of.
And if etching, you mean engraving or marking? Because etching kind of insinuates we're talking about like a chemical process.
Yeah. I think we're just words.
Words.
We have a shared library of settings on the website that you're welcome to grab. They're set up for various wattages, as well as lens combinations, and we have libraries up there for Liper and EasyCAD 2 and EasyCAD 3. That'll probably give you a great starting point. I hope that helps. Let's see. C. Wayne asks, how does energy per pulse vary with pulse width?
Well, pulse width is the amount of time that the laser is on when firing. Since it's a pulsed laser, it's not always on. It pulses, it fires in bursts. And so your pulse width is how wide that the width of that pulse is. It's the length of time that the laser is on while it's marking. So a larger pulse width, in most cases, save for some weirdness from JPT on UV lasers, a pulse width, generally the larger a pulse width you have, the more energy is going to be distributed each pulse. So that's the basic explanation, but there's also kind of a triangle of exposure with lasers that include the pulse width and the frequency and the power or duty cycle. So it's a little more complicated than that, but generally higher pulse widths mean more power output delivered to the substrate.
Yep. I don't think I have anything else to add to that.
Yep.
Hopefully that helps. And look who dropped in. Our boy Boyce.
What up, boys?
And he also brings up a good point. 37 watching and only 7 likes.
Smash that like button, guys, if you're getting value out of the video. It helps us reach new people.
Show us some love if you enjoy hanging out in the shop. Hope you're doing good, boys. Miss you, buddy.
He's been popping up on Discord a lot lately. He just did a coin that he posted. Looked pretty good. A 3D height map. So,
nice.
Cool.
Nice.
Stan says, got a fiber laser 20 watt from IKEA. I feel that my eyes are tired and light sensitive when working on the laser. Do you have preventive advice and best advice for resting apart from sleep? Well, here's my first tip. If your eyes are tired and light sensitive after working with the laser, it means you're not protecting your eyes enough. Or at least there's a good chance that you are.
What he was using.
Yeah. Or you are...
Don't trust the crappy glasses that come with your cheap diode. Well, probably not a cheap diode laser, but with your diode laser. So the stuff that comes with it is probably the absolute lowest level of protection you could offer your eyes. And they say it all the time, like, you only get one set, you know, so investing in a good pair of eye protection is, I think, one of the most important things you can do when you start your laser journey, just to make sure that that kind of stuff doesn't happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think in all of the diodes I've ever gotten in the shop to review, all of them, which has been a great many over the last few years, I think one has come with an acceptable pair of eye protection that's actually rated for blocking the wavelengths of light that laser is emitting. One. So my advice is to throw away whatever you're using. Don't turn the laser back on until you have some good, approved, certified eyewear, and then head to No IR and spend the money on eyewear that's actually going to protect your eyes from that laser radiation. If you're working with a diode, which it sounds like you are, I would recommend the DBY class filters or the KTI class filters, which are a little harder to find nowadays. DBY is largely taken over for them, but both provide OD7 plus protection against most visible wavelengths of light, including diode. So just right away, that would be my suggestion, and I highly recommend that you make that purchase. They're about $200. They're substantially more expensive than the junk that you get from Amazon, but they're going to provide the eye protection that really saves your vision in the long run. And remember, especially with diodes, but all lasers, you're not just worried about direct reflections, but also the scattered laser radiation in the room that you're working in. We've seen it time and time again with infrared cameras on things like CO2s and fiber lasers, but you can also see it very clearly with visible light lasers, that those machines in dark rooms light the room up like a Christmas tree, and your eye is absorbing all of those high energy photons that are making it to your eyes. So you really have to wear eye protection when the laser is in operation, and I recommend going to No IR. I think it's noirinsights.com now, and picking up a solid pair of glasses as soon as humanly possible. There's a lot of places in this industry where you can cut corners, and eye safety should just not be one of them.
I will add, I agree with all that, but a lot of brands are also doing fiber laser sources for diode gantries now. And Ilkir is one of the ones where you can get a 20-watt pulsed fiber source that mounts to your diode gantry. So there may be a wavelength discrepancy with the eye protection that you're wearing. So even if it is good, it might not be rated for your wavelength. And that is an enormously important thing you need to make sure is covered. Eye protection when it comes to wavelengths is you might as well not be wearing anything if you're wearing the one that doesn't protect for the wavelength. And I'm not saying that's an acceptable result, because it's not. You need to protect your eyes, but you need to make sure that it's the right wavelength you're protecting from. Blue light laser is 455, if I'm remembering correctly, wavelength. And fiber is 1064. It is fairly far apart when it comes to wavelengths and eye protection. And most eye protections that are cheap are really only designed to cover one wavelength. That's all they're tested for. So just be conscious of that. But going back, if your eyes are tired and light sensitive after working with the laser, it's either your eye protection's not doing a sufficient job, probably, or it could also be the position of where your laser is in relation to you. If your laser is off to the side of you, or back to the right a bit, or left, and you're wearing glasses that don't seal to your face, you could be reflecting the light off the back of the lenses right into your eye because it's sneaking in from the edge. So if the laser isn't in front of you and you're spending a lot of time with the laser at an angle where it can reflect directly behind your glasses, that could be part of the problem too. You do need to rest, but you also need to protect your eyes, and that's where I would start looking with all those tips.
Yeah, that's a telltale sign that your eye protection isn't doing its job. I work with very dangerous lasers all day long, like every single day of the week, and I do not get eye fatigue. My eyes don't feel funny after hours of working with the lasers. If you are experiencing any kind of optical symptoms, you need to consult a doctor, go get a vision checkup immediately, and B, you really need to sit and just decide, or at least consider, whether or not your eye protection or your personal protective equipment is not doing its job, because that is the only reason that you would be feeling symptomatic from exposure to lasers, as far as optics go.
Yeah. One other thing I'm just thinking, if you're engraving something and you're staring directly at where the laser is hitting, while your lenses are going to protect you from the wavelength if they're rated for it, the other thing that a laser can produce is really, really bright light from essentially vaporizing whatever material it's hitting. And that really intense bright white is kind of like it could essentially burn out. It's like looking into the sun in terms of brightness. So kind of like welder's eye. You need to be very careful that if you're looking at what you're engraving, you should not be staring at it, not directly at what you're marking.
Or hit
it's
pause.
okay to, hit pause. If you want to make sure it's not burning a hole in something
it's a
cool.
really
but
reliable function.
To just bring up more technical stuff, laser safety glasses are rated for their VLT. That's visible light transmission. That's how much visible light is getting through the glasses. If you see something that says it's got a VLT of 50%, that means half of the light in the visible spectrum that is being generated by that laser reaction is making it to your eye, and half is being blocked. Now that's fairly light. Usually you'll see them under 50%, which is what you want. People often complain about glasses being too dark to see what's going on while you're wearing them. But that's kind of the point. Those glasses aren't designed to save you from something like welder's eye. They're designed to filter out the laser radiation. The brightness is a separate hazard and requires separate precautions. So I recommend getting a lower VLT pair of protective glasses so that it's less of a concern. Obviously, Kyle is correct in saying that you shouldn't be staring at it regardless. But these are not welding helmets, right? They're there to filter out the laser radiation, and that's what they're going to do. So consider your VLT going forward as well. Make sure that you're getting something. I would say maybe in the like 5 to 20% range. I mean, you do want dark glasses if your concern is safety. You can, of course, I have a pair of UV glasses that are like VLT 100. They literally almost let all the light through. They're perfectly clear, and I never actually use those when I'm operating the UV because they would blind me. They're just like, it's way too bright. Those glasses are also rated for CO2, which I do use them with because that's not giving off nearly the same like radiance. So there's things that you need to consider on both sides of that coin. So consider VLT moving forward.
Yep. Awesome point.
Smart.
And Miranda also dropped the No IR link in chat. Thank you, Miranda.
Yeah.
It looks like Stan already ordered a set of free mascots with OD8 Plus after listening. So awesome. Adrian's
free mascots generally regarded as a good brand. They're not like top of the line. I want top of the line protection for my irreplaceable organs, but I understand that that's not in everybody's budget. When you can, I'd replace them with better glasses, but the free mascots are going to be better than what's bundled with most lasers out of the box. So I would applaud you for that choice, especially if you don't have a lot of other options.
Adrian says, what's the difference between YAG and fiber?
They're very different types of lasers that try to do the same thing. A YAG is a solid state laser, so it's actually using a crystal to produce the laser beam that you're seeing when you're marking things. It's still, the target is still 1064 nanometers, but there's a lot of things about YAGs that have been made obsolete by fibers. Fibers are kind of like the new YAG. YAG is pretty old technology. For one, they're far less power efficient. They consume way more energy than fiber lasers. The other is cooling. They get incredibly hot. They need active cooling typically, so you'll have like a chiller hooked up to one instead of seeing it air cooled like you normally would. The beam quality is nowhere near as good, so you're not getting the same fineness or consistency with your beam as you would from a fiber laser. They break a lot more often because of the solid state aspect of the laser. They simply wear out quicker. So, you're not getting that 10 or 100,000 hour lifespan that we usually talk about for fiber lasers. You're not going to see that from a YAG. They're going to need replacement parts much, much sooner than that. YAG lasers are also way bigger. Fiber lasers are super light. Even the desktop ones, I mean, the full size, as we call them, quote unquote, units, can be carried to a trade show with 2 people, or 1, I guess, if you're really patient. YAGs are substantially heavier, and so there's a lot of differences between the two. A lot of people in China are trying to get rid of old stock on YAG lasers, so usually you'll see them for less money than a comparative fiber, but it's going to cost you more in the long run because you're going to have to replace parts and it's going to die much sooner. The fiber will last you far longer. So those are some of the important differences between the two. At the end of the day, they're both making a 1064 laser, yes, but they do it very, very differently, and fiber in general is considered far more rugged and just more modern and cost effective in the long run. So I wouldn't, unless you were trying to do something very, very specific, and we'd be having a separate conversation about that, I wouldn't recommend a YAG over a fiber to anyone. So just something to keep an eye out for. I don't know if you have input on that, but
Nope.
That's my hot take.
You got it covered. I actually don't know a ton of the difference, but I know there is a difference.
Yeah.
Even if they do the same or similar job in some cases. Steve says, what wavelength is suitable for CO2 laser? So we kind of touched on blue light wavelength, like the typical diode being 455. You got UV at 355-ish, depending on the UV. That's UVA is 355, but there's also other UVs that range a little bit lower than that for UVB and UVC, depending on the job that they're doing. Then you have fiber at 1064. You have green light just above UV. What is that, 532 or something?
533, I think.
532.
Yeah. Something like that, yeah. Green lasers are the ones that give you those really cool 3D crystal in the middle engraves that you'd get from like a super specialty shop. Hyper expensive lasers. Then you have CO2 at 10,600 or is it 9,800 or something?
I think it's
9,300.
960. It's 9.6, 9.2. So it's like 9,600, 9,200. The lower wavelengths, the shorter wavelengths, are usually higher powered lasers. So the longer wavelengths are usually lower powered lasers. If you want to learn more about that, a really good resource is Coherent's website. Since they specialize in that kind of technology, they have a huge range of different CO2 wavelengths for their various CO2 lasers, and they do a very good job on their product pages describing each of them. We only really work with 10,600 nanometer CO2 lasers here because that is dominant in the marking and cutting industry at this scale. But when you get into larger lasers, specialty lasers, manufacturing lasers, things start to change, and there are reasons why you would want one over another. I don't think that would apply to most members in our audience. If you need to have that conversation with Coherent, you're probably already doing something really specific. But if you're curious and you just want to learn more about it, Coherent's website is a great learning resource to expand on that. It does get very, very technical very quickly. So if you don't have a head for that, maybe skip it and just know that 10,600 nanometers is the dominant wavelength in our sector of the industry. But there are different wavelengths for CO2 lasers, and they do have positives and negatives, just like anything else. So if you're interested, that's how I would go about learning more about it.
We have Stan. It is crazy. Okay, so it is crazy that this is not mentioned by suppliers. Again, thank you for the information. That's in reference to the eye safety and the fatigue. So yeah, some brands discuss it very, very shortly in like their instruction manual to avoid getting sued. But it's definitely, eye safety is downplayed a lot as like an afterthought in a lot of cases where it should really be like the very first thing you see. In some cases, I've seen it where the safety notification is limited to literally the eyeglass safety indicator on the outside of the box, and there's no other mention of it. So we do our best to educate within the community and share as much information as we can on that, which is why we have a lot of what we feel are very important rants when it comes to eye safety.
Yeah.
But I've had a lot of people come to me and say their eyes, their vision is permanently damaged because they didn't listen to warnings or straight up ignored it or didn't look into it. And that's why we bring it up as frequently as we do. So
Frequently and passionately as we do.
yes. So we hope it helps. We hope you enjoy your lasering safely, and you no longer have your eye fatigue at the end of the day. So cheers.
We've got a member on the Discord, Bunny Washer, who is super passionate about this subject as well. And I mean, he'll just straight up tell anybody, like, there is no safe way of looking at the laser while it's in operation. And if you really want to, build a solid enclosure where no light's going to leak out and install a camera. And then you can watch it all day long until that camera burns out. But that's legitimately the only, it's legitimately the only safe way to watch your laser in operation that you can, with 100% surety, say you're not being exposed to.
I've had people argue that they watch the laser with their eyes because they're worried about damaging a camera, like a camera sensor. And I'm like, what are you talking about?
I would happily sacrifice $1,000 camera if it meant that I didn't damage my eyes for the rest of my life.
Yeah, that's great.
Not that there's a lot of tact to that, because I've been pointing very, very expensive cameras at lasers for a very long time, and I've yet to destroy them. So,
it's a pretty limited circumstance. Like, you have to get the angle just right. You got to be probably engraving something fairly reflective, like copper or something. I mean, the circumstance in which you'd burn out a lens or a sensor on a camera, I mean, it's a pretty limited.
I've probably heard of more laser sources getting destroyed from reflections from lasers than actual
cameras. Yeah,
I agree. Like, from my 4 years of whatever of the exposure to the community, like, I've heard of probably maybe half a dozen to a couple handfuls of people who have burnt out sources with reflections, but I think I've maybe heard one person say they had to replace a camera because of the laser exposure. So,
and I've had a couple of people come to me asking for tips on how to resolve issues with having their laser in an area where their family walks in and out, or they have kids that walk in and out to see them throughout the day because they work from home or whatever. And going back to what the guys said about just doing a solid enclosure and throwing a camera in there, it's the best possible way to see what's going on and know that everything going in there is going safely and well, and reducing as much risk as possible. Because if you have somebody walk in without glasses enough times, that's a lot of exposure, and especially where if it's a young kid or a pet where there's just no way to stop that. I mean, it's just better to be safe. Throw a light and a camera in an enclosure and just be done with it.
And then you can add air extraction, and you have your fume management at the same time.
Yep, absolutely. It also helps with sound. So if you're sensitive to that high tone from hitting metal, which I can be sometimes. The enclosure helps. TJ says, do you have a link for the glasses you wear? So the no IR ones, Miranda up above in chat at 2:26 Eastern dropped the no IR link. Those are those premium glasses that Alex is talking about. We also have the free mascot ones on the buying guide. So if you go to our website, the lasereverything.net site, and go to the buying guide, those are an eye protection. Anthony, how would you rate your goggles? Because I think you said you really like those, right? Ooh, no audio. Oh, maybe it's me. Maybe my headset died. Chat is saying they can't hear you, Anthony. I'm fixing my audio too, so hang on.
Yeah, I feel like Anthony's gotten like very slowly quieter and quieter as we've gone today.
I think his lav died, so hang tight, guys. We'll circle back to that. Don't rush, Anthony. We got you. So here's another.
Now?
Ooh, yeah, we can.
All right. Sorry, I had to switch to my laptop. My lav mic died.
Silly lavs.
Yeah. So as far as my cloud ray goggles, I feel like the VLT is way too high on those. So if I'm doing like titanium in particular on the fiber laser, I just did that titanium coin for the coin challenge last month, and it was like aggressively bright with the 50 watt and a 110 millimeter lens. So like even being in the room as that's running, just the peripheral light coming through. So I think it's time for me to go ahead and invest in something that has a little bit more blockage of light and probably better coverage too. So I'll be buying some new glasses here soon.
Nice. So there you go. You got 3 hot takes on 3 different manufacturer options. Hope that helps. I'm working on a change in shop and all that. Once that happens, I don't know when that happens. It could be 3 months from now or a year from now or whatever, but I will be building some custom enclosures for my lasers because I have a dog that hates the sound of lasers. And I also have my other half and other family members that want to be able to visit and walk in freely. So that's how I'll be going. Alan says, knowing the FDA is the regulatory agency for lasers, is there any risk to purchasing a non-FDA approved laser for business use? What makes a machine FDA approved? That's a good question. A lot of it comes to confirming wavelength and safety standards and setting a class for the laser. So, for example, you have class 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? And those have to do with having no enclosure, so direct exposure to the laser versus or direct reflective exposure. You also have essentially light blocked. So you can imagine like the diode galvos that have the cone on the front, right? Those would be a different classification because now they're being partially filtered. So it gives you some level of protection for the people around you. Maybe not the best, but some. Then you have door interlocks, which gives you a whole nother jump in classification, which means it has an enclosure and a door. And if the door is open, the interlock cuts power to the laser. It won't fire unless it senses that safety switch being closed. That's the type of thing, for the most part, where the FDA's getting involved, is making sure that those things are hit on and classified correctly. I don't know if they go further than that, because honestly, that's kind of where my purview ends. But when you're importing a laser, there is an FDA form that you actually have to fill out to basically allow the FDA to approve it and get you past customs import. Otherwise, your laser is going to be stuck. You can declare that it doesn't fall under normal things, and there's not a one size fits all with lasers either, because you also have like light show lasers. While those could, in theory, cause damage to somebody's retina, the amount of power output that those have is significantly lower versus something like a 100-watt fiber laser cutter, or even a 50-watt CO2 laser, because you're talking like milliwatts of power instead of watts of power. There's a balancing act where the FDA is getting involved for that. But I hope that makes sense.
I would, if you're really worried, I'd talk to a lawyer, I think, on this one. But like, also, if we're talking about marking and cutting lasers, I'm not even sure where you would obtain a laser like that, like the laser that we're describing, a non-FDA approved. Like, you'd never get it into the country. We're talking about like shopping on the black market. I mean, that would just be like,
yeah, that's kind of what I was going to bring up.
Yeah, I'm not going to sit here on my YouTube channel and be like, go buy a black market laser. You know, like don't do that.
It might not even make it through customs.
You're right.
Yeah.
Like, where do you even get that?
So, like, if it's in like testing or whatever, you can import it for testing purposes, or for specific use cases where you're acknowledging there could be a problem. And that, I forget the title of the form, but it's the FDA form that you have to fill out. Usually the manufacturer will send that to you already filled out.
Yeah.
If the shipper needs it to get it through customs. But yeah, we're not, legally certified to be like FDA lawyers over here or anything. So but if it's not FDA approved, generally speaking, it just means they probably didn't go through the paperwork aspect of it. Because these are industrial machines, not, hair removal lasers or something. So take that for what you will. If customs is allowing you to import it into the country, that's generally where, in terms of industrial laser marking, that's where the purview ends for us. When it comes to safety, and that's about it for us. So class 1, class 2, class 3, class 4, and where that falls, and etc. So hope that helps, Alan. Sorry we didn't have more info for you. Inferno Eagle says, I have a 40-watt diode laser I was able to get and engrave on stainless steel on a kitchen knife, but I am getting inconsistent results on quality. But I am getting a deep engrave for results. Any advice? The problem with engraving metal with a diode laser, particularly if you're breaking into the surface and not color marking the top, because you can get colors, you can get black. But if with a 40-watt, maybe even 20-watt, you might have enough power concentration to actually dig into the metal just a bit. The problem is you have so much heat soak when doing that, because the wavelength is so inefficient at marking that material, that you're going to get a varying result the further you go from your starting point. As the item heat soaks, it's going to affect how the metal takes that, and also your line interval. So if you have a fill that you're doing, like a hatched engrave, the line interval is going to make a huge difference. So when you compound the heat and everything else that's going into it and heat soaking the item, when you have an overlapping line interval where the beam is physically overlapping a percentage of the last beam's covered area, or last line's covered area, the more overlap there is, the further down the line you get, the more of a change you're going to get in result, and potentially color and other stuff. So you may have to mess with line interval. That might help. You may have to try and just do less work per pass. So being less aggressive with your cut. But again, because Diode is super inefficient at actually digging into metal versus just surface marking it, there's a fine line there that you're going to have to ride, right? That's kind of where my expertise end on that, because I haven't done a lot of Diode on metal engraving. I don't know if the guys have any thoughts on that.
I think the fill method could have something to do with the efficient or the effectiveness of it too. So like in thinner areas, if you're doing like text or something, a lot of times the energy ends up more concentrated in those thin areas as it's going through faster. That could have something to do with it too. And as it's going over the wide areas, that heat's getting dispersed over a wider area, so you're not going to get maybe necessarily the same effect. So that could explain some of it.
I think that's an important distinction too. I heard you change the word you were using. It's definitely a dispersion of heat rather than energy. So you're trying to keep the part either uniformly cool, or you're going out of your way to keep small sections hot while you're working your way through the artwork. And you can do either of those things with purpose. I've done both of them with purpose, but it's an important distinction to make, because it does affect the final engraving, especially on more sensitive materials. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, good stuff.
And I mean, I think probably the most obvious answer too is that Diode isn't the best tool for engraving in metal. So I mean, it's something you can achieve a degree of success with, but you're going to be limited with your success, and so it's just kind of a expectation you should set there too. Because I mean, the higher power diodes now, they can cut through like tin foil and stuff because they've got so much energy, it's vaporizing the metal. But as far as like doing a deep engrave or a clean engrave on metal, it just might be a challenge that you're going to end up butting your head up against for a long time.
Yeah. To kind of add to what that point is, because you bring up a good point too, as a possible solution, if your diode will allow it, because not all diode controllers will, see if you can do overscan. Because it depends on if you're strictly like a G-code controller or a DSP. But if you can add overscan in your parameters, it will force the laser to go past the point where it stops engraving in order to maintain speed. And the more overscan you have, the more the laser will go past. And that may help, keep your line time, or basically every line that the laser takes to do a single beam pass. It'll potentially make it a little more consistent. So for those fine little areas, it'll add a little bit of pause before it finishes that line and starts the next one. That's the only thing I can think of that might help with that as well. Good question. What up, Resin? Resin says in terms of the safety stuff, same with resin. Most manufacturers just don't talk enough about it and how toxic resin is. I think one of the interesting things with that is the thing I see on the laser engraving side is when a manufacturer says that resin's non-toxic, laser engravers think they can engrave it because it says non-toxic. And that's not strictly true, because it's non-toxic when it's dried in terms of touching food on it or, you know, whatever, right? You can use it for food grade areas, or it doesn't emit VOCs that are going to destroy your lungs.
I wouldn't even say it's strictly not true. I would say that it's completely irrelevant. We're not talking about incinerating it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's not the use case that warning is describing or trying to warn you against. So they're very, very different things.
Yeah. So there's overlaps in industries here where, like, just in the resin side, like if you're doing resin crafts, you bring up a good point with the allergies versus permanent lung damage, and not using a respirator, and maybe just stuff that isn't even tested for, and they're calling stuff non-toxic or low VOC or no VOC. But like, just because of that, it doesn't mean it's safe to touch or safe to have all over your skin, or, you know. And then in our industry where we're lighting it on fire, it's another compounded issue on top of that even. So I know I'm ranting about that, but that's because I've gotten, I think, 6 questions in the last 5 days about people engraving resin coated coasters, like the half and half ones, and I think I'm getting PTSD from it. But yeah, good point, resin. That's safety stuff seems really lax these days from a lot of corners in the maker world. Inferno, companies use 1080p cameras to watch robot welders. Never heard of or see an issue there. Yeah, good point.
Yep.
Yeah, and a lot of those industrial machines that use machine vision that operate with lasers, you almost never see an issue there either. So kind of wild. Steve says, question, I raised my acrylic 3 millimeters for flashback. The combustion pops I am getting when cutting, is there anything to be concerned with there? Are the combustion pops you're getting have to do with the coating still being on it, that protective layer on the outside? Because if your air assist or if your laser's melting that film on the outside, on the back or the front, and your air assist is pumping air into it, that could be part of the problem. But when acrylic is cut with a laser, it also kind of creates like a liquefied fume, which can ignite. Are you using honeycomb?
He replied and said no masking at all.
No mask. Ooh, you're quick. So if you're using honeycomb, I find that in the honeycomb, there's these vertical bars or horizontal bars that support the honeycomb so it doesn't dip in the center. It's possible that the popping could be the fumes getting trapped and igniting on the portions of the honeycomb where there's a little pocket where the airflow can't push through. That could be what's going on.
I've cut a ton of acrylic and I've never had that issue on my honeycomb.
Yeah, I've not done a ton of acrylic, but I have done some, and it's not been a problem for me. But I have had a couple of people come back to me from coachings where it's been a symptom. And in the testing, we determined that it could be airflow related. So high or low air assist. Low air assist means you may not be clearing the fumes fast enough, and it could be igniting something. or
I've also
the flame.
seen, or rather heard, the kind of like pop, the snap, crackle, pop from uneven heating of the acrylic surface, which could be a symptom of like a gantry issue or a leveling of the bed being a problem. So I've seen and heard that as well in the past. Not necessarily
Would it be
the case, but just something I've heard.
Would it be that maybe like extruded acrylic versus cast acrylic? Like that might be. What kind of acrylic are you using? Because I've only ever done
Yeah, that's a good question.
cast.
Any
never
kind of
done
like
extruded.
stress, right, that you're causing on the material due to like the hot and cold areas of it as you're heating it up and cooling it down rapidly, I think could end up causing those symptoms. The cause of that heating, that uneven heating, whether it's the fact that you're using extruded acrylic over cast, which is going to be far more consistent as far as the body of the material goes, or you're having an issue with your laser or your spot size or anything else, I think any kind of like uneven heating like that could cause those kind of symptoms. So determining the cause of the symptom and treating the cause would be the proper action. But again, just 2 cents. Sorry, Anthony, I didn't mean to cut you off, man. You just gave me a flash of insight.
Yeah, it's all good, bro.
Yeah, if it's the trap gas, the way to mitigate that is it's either airflow from your nozzle that's needed to be adjusted, or airflow through your exhaust. You may need to just evacuate more air out of that chamber in order to move more of that trapped, essentially gaseous acrylic out of the air. It really shouldn't be an issue. It's not normally a problem, but ultimately it's kind of like, I see it as, have you ever seen that video where, or have you ever seen it in real life, where you put a candle out and it reignites off the fumes? It's essentially, it's like that. Yeah. The material that's in the air suspended is going to be far more flammable than any solid state material of the same material typically, because it
more surface area.
Huh?
I said because more surface area. It was a question, not a statement.
Because
there's more surface area.
So yes, but it's also just it's in a form that's essentially, fire is a form of turning something to vapor. So if it's already in vapor form, it's going to ignite more readily. I guess. I don't know. I'm not a physicist, but yeah. So just, I hope that helps. Let us know how it goes, and if you have any follow-up questions. I got to start marking more questions. We ran out.
TJ Michael asked, has anyone messed with the $28 settings in Lightburn with diode laser changing frequency?
No, I have not.
I missed it. What, can you repeat that for me, Anthony?
You can put in a console command in Lightburn for the diodes. It's the $ and then 28.
Oh, dude, no, I don't mess. I'm not that kind of smart.
I think I remember Michael from ET Laser Works saying that he had done that with his diode and noticed a slight difference. But I don't know. I probably would have to do like a deep dive, multi-hour rabbit hole session to try and figure out what legitimacy that would have. Because like diodes are typically like what you would consider a continuous wave laser, right?
Yeah, diodes are, well, no, diodes are pulsed actually.
Are they pulsed?
Most consumer diodes are pulsed lasers. So they're just affixed. So you're not making changes to the frequency or pulse width. But I believe most diodes are pulsed.
Oh, okay.
But they only operate one way. You know what I mean? Like it's not a variable. It's just a property. Yeah.
Yeah, there he is. Michael said $28 equals 10,000 to do metal engraving. So he does change that setting in his console to do engravings on metals, and he says it works. So that's something I'd probably have to deep dive into to try and figure out the intricacies of.
Yeah, I'm definitely not feeling prepared to comment on that for sure.
Yeah, I generally I leave that alone. But it's cool that it's there. I guess also too, to be fair, not every diode laser is going to have that functionality.
Yeah, probably not.
So that could be.
Yeah, I'm sure it comes down to the
what
chip,
module
right? The
and
board
stuff
that you're working with.
The module and the controller, yeah.
Yeah.
And the firmware. Okay, you did that one, so I'm gonna unmark that. And we got Frank says, "Good day. First, thank you. So, how deep of an engrave should I expect with a 20-watt fiber? I was getting decent depth, like 1 millimeter to almost 1.5, but now not so much. I'm thinking it's my depth maps." So here's the thing with depth maps. You're functioning on the quantity of passes mixed with the gray level that you have. And so if most of your design is closer to light than dark, most of your design is going to be squished into the upper layers of the depth map. If you have an even spread from light to dark, you're going to have an even spread of shallow to deep. And if all of your design is super dark, you're going to be engraving out many layers of your design, or the layers above your design, before you get to the first couple layers of your design. So that's a variable that you have to consider. But if you were to just draw a square as a vector or a circle and set a quantity of passes like 250, the idea is that every pass should take off a amount of metal, giving you more depth. The variable that comes into play once you hit a certain point is your focus. So if you're working with a really shallow lens, like for example on a gantry, a diode gantry, where you have that 20-watt module, for example, for a fiber, your focus is probably a really narrow range. So if you're working with something like that, you're going to have a very shallow depth of field that you can work with. Whereas something like on a normal galvo fiber, you have something like a 50 or a 70 millimeter work area lens, you're going to have literally like a millimeter to work with. Versus a 110, you're going to have 2 or 3 millimeters. Versus a 300 millimeter work area lens, you could have 10 millimeters. Because the shape of your focus, or the shape of your beam coming out of the lens, is typically an hourglass when you get it into focus, you're in the center crosshairs of that hourglass. And as you physically move up and down from that point, you're getting less power density, which means at some point you're going to start taking less material off per pass, up to the point where you're no longer taking material off. So getting your focal point centered into what you're working on might help with that. That could be a portion of what you're dealing with. It might not just be artwork related.
I think too, like, depth is not necessarily, or isn't just straight up, is not a function of your depth map or your laser settings. I think it's a function directly of the laser power. You could have a laser that's so powerful that in each layer it marks, it takes a millimeter off of the material, right? It doesn't matter how many millimeters or how many layers you have, and it doesn't matter how your graphic is organized. Every single one of those passes will be an entire millimeter. And so, that giant mega laser that does that versus the same exact file and the same software run with like a 20-watt laser are going to provide two very different depths, having run the same exact thing. So I don't necessarily...
I think you're
Okay, it wasn't just me.
No, Alex, I
All
think
right.
your lav died. We'll give him a sec.
Vinny said on his laser tree diode, it was limited to 5,000 too. So there might be just different degrees as well. I'm gonna have to get into that and figure it out. See what the function is on that.
Yeah, that's interesting. If you guys are enjoying hanging out with us while we're hanging out, and Alex and Rhiannon are tuning in lenses, we're doing Q&A, and then hit the like button.
I wonder how many lenses Rhiannon's made her way through so far.
I think she's on her third, but I couldn't tell you. It'd be a guesstimate. We'll find out when they're back.
Yeah, I've seen it cut back and forth a few times and looked like she was maybe measuring the red light offset because she was moving her finger back and forth, which it's an awesome trick. I was literally doing that yesterday when I was doing my UV on the 70 millimeter lens, and I was like, I should probably say something about like how much that makes it easier. And then like 2 minutes later, Alex mentioned it. So
Beat you to it.
yep.
Well, when Alex gets his thing sorted out, we'll let him loop back to that.
So it looks like Frank's asking a follow-up. So I was understanding about the depth of, oh, yep, there you go. The depth of the power of the laser. What about if you use a 150 and downgrade it to a 110? I'm assuming you mean lens. That would make a difference in depth. Yeah, because you're using, if you left the settings exactly the same, you're using a smaller field lens, and when the lens shrinks, the dot size shrinks, and when the lens or the field size expands, like to say a 300 millimeter lens, then your dot's going to expand too. So you're losing a lot of power by making a bigger field, and you're gaining power by going to a smaller field. Like I just went down to a 70 millimeter lens here this past week on my 50 watt, and it's a huge improvement even versus my 110. So
Yeah.
One
way that I like to explain it to people, particularly if you're into cars, it's kind of like if you go to a dyno, it's like a torque versus horsepower curve. You can have a lot of torque or you can have a lot of horsepower, but usually when you tune for one, you're losing the other. Right? So you're essentially, you can shift up or down on the lens, and that affects your dot size and your power density, but it's also affecting your focal range. So if the problem is that you're working with a medium-sized lens and you need more power density, you can move down the field size to get a tighter lens to get more power density, but you give up your focal range. You can go up to get more focal range, but it means you're going to be taking a lot more passes, or in some cases, like on copper, you're not going to be marking a 300 with a 300 lens on copper. It's just not happening. There's just not enough density there. So, awesome point.
Yeah, so you'll get deeper quicker, but you're going to run out of deepness quicker too. So it's just something to keep in mind. A 110 though, it depends on the material that you're using. But if you're doing coins, which I'm kind of assuming you are, I don't know whether or not for sure, but I've burned all the way through a coin without refocusing my 110 millimeter lens on a 30 watt machine. So if you're using a higher wattage machine, you're going to have more usable depth of field because you're just making more power higher up. And so, yeah, I think your 110 lens is sufficient where you're not going to be running out of juice and it'll help with the extra energy density.
Yeah. We got C. Wayne says, fiber lasers cut by ablation, not burning through. Diode and CO2 cut by heating and blowing the hot material out with gas or air. I mostly agree, but fiber lasers can burn through. It just depends on the material and what it is. Typically, when you're working with metal on a fiber, you're going to be ablating stuff into microparticles. But there is burning that's happening. That's why you get super bright light. It's not just ablation, but it is ablation. When you dump too much power into it, it can physically burn it. So hope that helps. Steve Campbell, when I raise the material up higher, I don't get that. However, I wanted to lower it so there's less of a drop in the part.
Yeah, so it sounds like trap gas is the issue.
Yeah, that'd be my guess. You could try doing like a homemade knife bed. So like, like the pop rivets, you can stick those into like some seat channels or something. Hey, welcome back, Alex.
Hey, I wanted to throw some real quick. So laser ablation, this is from the laser ablation article and everybody's favorite encyclopedia online. Laser ablation, or photoablation, also called laser blasting, is the process of removing material from a solid, or occasionally liquid, surface by irradiating it with a laser beam. At low laser flux, the material is heated by the absorbed laser energy and evaporates or sublimates. At high laser flux, the material is converted to a plasma. Usually, laser ablation refers to removing material with a pulse laser, but it is possible to ablate material with a continuous wave laser beam if the laser intensity is high enough. While relatively long laser pulses, for example nanosecond pulses, can heat and thermally alter or damage the processed material, ultra-short laser pulses, for example femtoseconds, cause only minimal material damage during the processing due to the ultra-short light matter interaction, and are therefore also suitable for micromaterial processing. So we're definitely heating, we're definitely seeing thermal reactions take place. So it's definitely chemical change. It's not as cut and dry as, it's ablation, so it's not doing anything. All of the thermal-related risks with these various materials and their decomposition products are very, very much relevant, and I don't want there to be any confusion about that.
Just so you know, Alex, your audio is borked. Can you check your mic in StreamYard?
Yep, sure can.
All right. Yeah, so Steve, I would try a knife bed, or not a knife bed. A knife bed might work, but setting up like a nail bed where you have a lot of points to hold up, and that way your nails can land in a position where your cutout parts are still supported, but it's also supporting the sheet so nothing moves when it's cut and separated. That might be a good option. I'm not sure how big your parts are, because that's really hard to do with really tiny things. But if you're working with things that are a couple inches big, that might help out and give you a lot of free-flowing air underneath.
We just went to, well,
You're hyper blown out.
I'm hyper blown out. Okay.
Mic test 1 2.
Oop.
There you
Working
go.
in the right direction now.
Mic test 1 2.
It's a lot better.
Yeah.
Yep.
Can you turn it up just a hair, maybe?
Peter picked a pickle from the pepper. Pocahontas. I don't know. Is it good?
Ooh, right there. It's a lot better now.
Okay. Yes, no, maybe.
Ooh, too much.
Oh, that's one, two.
Nope, too much.
this.
It's a little
It sounds
quieter,
like
but
we're hearing
cleaner.
you through Rhiannon, maybe. Or a different mic. I don't know. You sound distant now.
Express 1, 2. Hello, hello.
Turn your gain down. Yeah, maybe Jack's right. Maybe loose connection or something. Because we can go from hearing you to not hearing you to being blown out. Weird.
Mic test 1, 2. Hello.
Can hear you now. It's on the edge of being blown out again.
Mic test 1, 2. Mic test 1, 2. Hello. Hello.
A little bit lower if you can.
Mic test 1, 2. Hello.
I mean,
Lower.
a
Lower?
little lower.
Lower?
Yeah.
Mic test 1, 2.
Mic test 1, 2.
You're there. You're there.
Yeah?
Yeah.
All right. So, did you guys didn't hear anything that I said?
It was garbled out in segments. It just wasn't. Say it again if you can.
Okay, yeah, of course. So, I wanted to point out on the point of laser ablation that was mentioned, that this article, and I basically, here's what it says. I'll just read it verbatim again. Laser ablation, or photoablation, also called laser blasting, is the process of removing material from a solid or occasionally liquid surface by irradiating it, with a laser beam. At low laser flux, the material is heated by the absorbed laser energy and evaporates or sublimates. At high laser flux, the material is typically converted to a plasma. Usually, laser ablation refers to the removing of material with a pulsed laser, but it is possible to ablate material with a continuous wave laser beam if the laser intensity is high enough. While relatively long laser pulses, for example nanosecond pulses, can heat and thermally alter or damage the processed material, ultra-short laser pulses, for example femtosecond lasers, can only cause minimal damage during the processing due to the ultra-short light matter interaction and are therefore also suitable for micromaterial processing. Since we're using nanosecond lasers, thermal damage is very much in play, and I don't want that to be counted out or overlooked because we're ablating something. Ablation carries all of the same thermal decomposition risks that normal incineration would carry with it. Maybe not in the same quantities, but at the scale that we're talking about, I don't think it makes much of a difference. You're still thermally altering and damaging the material, and thus the thermal decomposition products need to be taken into account. So I don't want anybody to think that just because something is being ablated means that it is thermally inert or that the thermal decomposition products do not matter, because that is not the case. And I just wanted to be really clear about that before we moved on.
No, that's an awesome point. Yeah, for sure.
A good example of this too, if you crank the power up too high on a laser with a really tiny lens and you hit something really hard, say a piece of scrap stainless steel, when you get super aggressive like that, you're not just ablating, you're actually turning the metal into a liquid slag state when you're throwing it. And it can actually re-weld onto the surface, and you can actually burn yourself with the slag coming off. So it's not just ablation. You are actually heating the metal and melting it and burning the hell out of it in some cases.
Yeah, I mean, if there were
Just as
no
a point of testing.
if there were no thermal decomposition products, then we would be able to engrave vinyl, right? No problem. We wouldn't even think about it. But we can't. That's very hazardous, super toxic. And the reason for that is because there is a chemical change happening and there is a thermal reaction that's taking place, especially because of the pulse width of our lasers, right? And in the nanosecond range.
Right.
Nobody here, nobody watching this channel is using a femtosecond laser. They're not. So that's just not relevant here. And it's really, really important to make the distinction. So I just didn't want there to be any misinformation, especially when it comes to safety stuff. It's very important to me.
Yeah. Good conversation topic. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Speaking of PVC,
Right.
PJ says he was going to make a vinyl record clock,
Nope.
but found out burning PVC makes hydrochloric acid and phosgene after doing material test on a first record, one and done. Yeah, don't PVC doesn't belong under a laser. There are quote unquote laser safe PVCs out there that aren't actually PVC. And the reason why I say that is the C in PVC is the poisonous part. PVC is polyvinyl chloride, chlorine. When the chlorine gas that from burning the PVC gets into the air and mixes with moisture, you're essentially making like mustard gas. And there's your hydrochloric acid. So, good call on that, TJ, on canceling that one.
And the reason
go
go
ahead.
ahead. I was just the reason
say-
I turned my camera and showed that sign sitting on my floor is because that's a job I got from a local furniture store for a sign replacement. Their original sign was cut back in 2018 by a lady that had a large format CO2 laser, but she has since retired due to medical reasons because she was cutting clocks out of vinyl records. So
Holy.
the only reason I'm doing that sign right there is because there's a lady who's physically incapable of doing it anymore because she was doing that. So
That looks
yeah,
like your correction is fucked up and you might have to do it again.
just don't do it.
It's just
not
not
worth
even
it.
remotely close to being a square. I mean, take your measurements. We'll see what it says, but yeah, I know. But now
Is the outside edge bowed out?
Oh, are you guys talking to me?
Yeah.
It's just not a square. Look at it. Why is the top so much shorter than the original test box?
It might have moved. As long as the edges are correct and the square comes out as an actual square so you can measure it diagonally and it's centered on
Write it
output,
again and
then
put the red dot right in the
then
middle
it's
of the
fine. You can
crossbow.
just adjust scale.
It's okay. I just want to see how they compare. Yeah. You see that? All right, I guess. It's okay. Try it. See what happens.
Yeah, when you mark it, you can when you mark the test square too, if you're worried about if it's square or not, like the edges are actually straight edges, grab a piece of paper and check it against the mark.
I just feel like it's gonna either the width, but I'm suspicious of the height. I think the height is going to be like drastically under scale, which would be random from one random lens. But I don't know. We'll see what happens. Rand's going to take the measurements now. So,
All right.
What size lens you want right now?
what are we on?
Still the 110.
Oh, it's still the 110. This is the fourth 110 lens because we have 4 different 110 lenses and they all require their own corrections. If you guys are curious, look at this. Here are the, of course, why would you be working? Hold on one second. Something's up with this. Let me delete this and make a new one. One moment, please.
Can you expand his screen?
Yeah. Let me just get this back up.
There we go. Okay, buddy, take your measurements. I don't know. Just leave it. I'll check it in a second. Transform, fit to screen, and blow me up. Nope, that's Kyle. Thank you. So here are the differences. Check this out. This is pretty wild. So all 4 of these lenses are 110 lenses. All 4 of them. But the focal distances are all off by multiple millimeters each. And then the lens corrections are all drastically different for the X and the Y. So this is why it's important to correct for every lens that you have. They're not cross-compatible corrections. They definitely vary from glass to glass. And so this data, I think, does a good job illustrating that in a visible way, that you really do have to do every lens. It's not a one and done thing. You're not correcting for something on the machine. We are correcting for something on the glass. So I just wanted to show that really quick.
Yeah, that's scale distant difference between 90.5 and 79.1. That's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so a lot of the data. So one of the things that CloudRay said to me when they sent the QS50 for testing the fiber is that the way they do their lens corrections is they do a base one, but they don't send that lens out. They use that as a generic lens correction for every laser they send out. And all the science that we know, right, over time that we've tested tells me that that's the wrong way to do it because every lens is different. Yeah,
it doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah.
So they either have incredibly consistent lenses from a single manufacturer and they're like hyper conscious of the way glass works or something, or there's something fundamentally wrong with it. And my testing is more or less reflecting what you're seeing, where the focal distance is changing, the scale is changing, the actual stretch and skew are changing. Some lenses actually have a warp in one corner. They actually sent me 3 lenses separately to test, as well as the one that came in the fiber. So that's a video that'll come out eventually. It's
nice.
It's just taking forever because I have so many damn lenses. But and another thing to factor in with what Alex just showed, where he had I think it was a 177, a 178, and a 180, 2 177s. Consider the fact that on a 110 lens, you might have like a functional 5 millimeter range, a focal field or a focal range, from top to bottom of effective usable area, just as a generic number, right? That's going to vary from lens to lens, and I'm just throwing a number out. I'm not aiming to be accurate on this, but so if your halfway point is half of that, right? So call it 2.5 millimeters. There's a bigger than 2.5 millimeter delta between the smallest and biggest lens there. Yeah. So if you're off by a millimeter on either way when switching between those two lenses, you're going to be completely out of focus. Mm-hmm. You're not even going to be in the middle. So if you're digging below the surface and you're close, you're going to be completely out. And if you're doing a depth engraving, if you're doing a depth engraving, you're going to be screwed. So another reason to add on to the list as to why it's important to do that. But
I would say, I mean, with as easy as it is to do these corrections in Lightburn, I wouldn't even use the manufacturer's settings. I would just throw the lens in and immediately just set it up on my own. Instead of including any core files or anything like that. Yeah,
we suggest as much in the Lightburn for Galvo crash course to just throw them away. Don't even use them. Don't look at them. Don't save them. They're irrelevant. I didn't say that before Lightburn had native lens corrections, but now that it does, it's literally pointless to do it any other way.
It's worth the 20 minutes, half an hour per lens to just
I know Rhiannon's
get
on
it
her
freaking done.
fourth lens for the day, and we've been streaming for 2 hours. So
yeah,
I mean,
and you guys paused for a customer.
And we paused for a customer, and we've been answering questions. And Rhiannon's been stopping because I've been in the middle of a sentence, and she needs some guidance on an input or a measurement she's taken. So she's sitting there waiting for me to finish talking so that we can converse about those kind of things behind the scenes. So it's just it really is not that much time.
Yeah, I would say 5 to 10 minutes once you get good at it. Because I mean, I have probably a dozen lenses that I had to go through and redo all of them, and so I got pretty good at it. In 5 to 10 minutes, I mean, it's easy peasy.
Yeah, and remember, Rhiannon's brand new to this too. This is the fourth lens she's ever done, ever. And it's taking her 30 minutes. And again, with all of the other things, that are getting in the way, about 30 minutes on average. I mean, if that's not a signifier that you can handle this, I don't know what is.
Yep.
Oh, by the way, if you're looking for some of this really fancy black tape and you didn't watch yesterday's episode, make sure you head over to beamituplasertape.com. Yeah, look at him. He's smiling over there, Mr. Smiley. And pick up some tape from Anthony. He's spent a long time making sure that he has the actual best tape that the industry has to offer on this kind of stuff. And, I don't know. Talk about the tape, man. Tell me tape things. Why do you like this tape?
Yeah, I mean, I ordered samples from several different manufacturers and just wanted to test it, and I mean, it's doesn't leave residue behind when you peel it. It doesn't gooey messes behind when you engrave with it. I've used it with my CO2, I've used it with UV, with fire, with diode, marking it without burning through if you use low power settings. And then if you do want to just leave the tape in place and burn through it, you don't have to worry about it leaving a nasty mess behind. I mean, when I use my CO2 on wood, I mask everything off for the most part, and that way it saves on time having to do like post-processing, and it just peels right off. But it doesn't peel off so easily that you have to worry about it lifting. So it's good stuff, and I'm not trying to get rich off anybody. It's very fairly priced, and the more you buy, it's $5 flat rate shipping. So if you buy one roll, it's $5 to ship it. If you buy 15 rolls, it's $5 to ship it. So
one of the things that I think really speaks about the peelability of the tape is how Rhiannon keeps peeling this up, but it's only peeling up one layer at a time, and it's not destroying the literal tape underneath it. Is pretty impressive for tape. If you were to try that with, any kind of like high adhesive tape, that would be a literal disaster. So, yeah. You guys still there? I think Kyle's muted.
Yep.
Okay.
No, I'm still here.
I'm just copying Rhiannon's scale data into this here really quick.
Yeah, and I mean that's an added layer of time suck too, is like with you guys annotating this too. So it's the time that it really takes to do this is not that high.
Yeah, and I've talked, if you didn't watch yesterday's stream, make sure you go check that one out. I talk about the importance of why I'm doing this, why I'm adding all this data to a spreadsheet. Having it has been so helpful so many times when I have ruined things digitally on the computer, and just having like the lookup table for all of the equipment that I have and all of its specs that I've measured myself. Man, it's taken a while, but it is so nice to have. It's so nice to have.
Yeah. And
that's just scale, right, Rhiannon, not red dot? Okay, just scale. Got it. I marked scale, and I await your red dot findings.
Having that extra layer of confidence in your lenses, too, is like, I think it's invaluable. Just knowing that your laser is going to mark where you see the red light shining, or, just you have a very specific, like if you're trying to frame something inside of a box and make sure that it all lines up well, If it's guesswork, then you're going to end up wasting materials, and you don't always have the materials around to waste. So just being confident that you can line something up, and then I'll use like a tool line or a box to frame where I want it to go and line that up and then hit fire. And I mean, 10 out of 10 times it's right there. So
one of the things about this process that's been amazing to have are the dot sizes that we've been measuring with the AM scope, and being able to see the dot size so clearly and get such a precise measurement off of it, and know in ideal conditions what dot size our laser is capable of producing. That's been a game changer, man, to the point where I've thought about like offering like a service or something where you check out on PayPal for $10, right? And then you stick a metal business card in an envelope and you mail it here, and we'll like use the AMScope to get you an accurate figure on your dot size. I thought that might be like super useful, because I've tried with the digital microscopes and you can get close, you can estimate, and it's, you know, it's fair, but like knowing the actual value on a certain material is so handy. It's so nice. And the AMScope, which again you guys haven't really seen lately anyway, it is so useful for being able to see. You get to see it all in 4K, super high definition. It's really easy to read those like sub-millimeter scaled like rulers and things. It's been great. So that's something I've been kicking around in my head. Not to, again, make money, because it would be really hard to make money off of that, but just to like make up for some of the time and just toss something under the microscope real quick, get a dot size from it. You send the person an email. Here it is. Your wood dot size with your 20-watt diode laser is this. You know, I thought that might be handy, but I don't know.
Alex, I think you might have bumped one of the knobs on your... You're legible, but you're starting to hit the edge of being blown out again.
How's this?
Say again?
Test 1 2. I literally haven't touched anything.
You're better, but maybe a little bit more if you change something.
Like a little bit quieter?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Test 1 2. Hello. Test 1 2.
A little more.
Test. Hello. Yeah.
That's a lot better.
Yep.
Okay. Great. Red dot's done for this lens. All right. Great. I'm gonna copy this over now.
That might be auto mic adjustment in StreamYard trying to adjust for something else and blowing you out.
Adjust for these nuts.
Boom. We got some more questions. Joseph says, I just started my venture into fiber lasers with a 20-watt comm marker B4. Awesome. One problem I've come across is that the red framing laser is offset from the working laser by a few millimeters on both X and Y axis. Focus is good. Materials are secured so they won't move. And I'm using Lightburn. Is this a typical problem that can be
a fun one for you?
Yeah. If you look at the screen that's showing right now, boom, in the dead center of the screen a little bit high, it says red dot. And that's how you can change that offset. There's an offset and a scale. So the offset will be like in relation to where the laser itself is marking. You can move it up or down or left and right to make it line up better. And then there's the scale, which will change the size of it so you can get it lined up. And this is something we spent some time talking about yesterday during the live stream as well. I'm talking about red dot size or the scale and offset, and how you can, choose, like, do you want your laser to frame dead center of where the laser marks, or do you want it to frame on the outside or the inside too? So that was actually a really good conversation. You can go back to yesterday's stream and watch.
Yeah, and in yesterday's stream, we mentioned that we have an entire episode on that. So if you go to the channel search box on the homepage of the channel, not the YouTube search, but the channel search, and you type in red or red dot, it will come up. We have a red dot alignment video where this entire process that Rhiannon's doing to correct the red dot, we detail exactly how to do that step by step, what your different options are, what you're looking for. It's a really good video, so if you haven't watched that one, make sure you go check that out as well.
I also super briefly cover it in my lens calibration video for Lightburn, the complete guide one.
Yep.
But yeah,
it covers just about everything else Rhiannon is doing today. So also a good episode to go watch if you're curious about what's going on in the background here.
Yep. If you get hung up with shifting stuff around, so the actual offset, Just remember that positive values going up means you're shifting in the positive direction on that axis. So if you remember graphing stuff out in like algebra in high school or whatever, negative is to the left or down, positive is to the right or up.
Look,
And other than that,
Rhiannon's about to get a surprise. Look what lens she's working on.
Oh, yeah, a little
It's
teeny
the
tiny guy.
it's the F63 50 by 50
oh my god, yeah, it's a little guy.
on an 80 watt, dude.
Is that a Ronar Smith?
Nope, sure isn't.
Is it an OPEX?
No, dude, it's a fucking Cloud Ray special.
Oh, all right.
$59.99. Let's see if an 80 watt laser will really destroy a few silica lens.
Well, you'd have to pump some power through it. But.
Pump some
you probably
power
destroy
through it,
the bed
Rhiannon.
first.
She's laughing at me.
Steve Campbell says, a pro tip for you, those that use Illustrator. I've got the color swatches for Lightburn, so I can set all of my cut types in Illustrator. And when I paste it into Lightburn, I don't need to assign anything. So that works great. But if you change material, then you still have to reassign your settings to the color swatches again. So don't forget to change it if you have to change it. But if you only work with one material in Lightburn, that is a fantastic way to do it.
That's what Miranda tells me about my underwear.
About your color swatches?
Whoops. Whoopsie.
You leaving rainbow skid marks?
Yeah, everybody else gets to take off from work when they have violent outbursts of diarrhea, but I have to be here.
Burn. All right.
Self-burn. Self-5.
Jack with the pro tip. So this is coming back from the PVC vinyl record project that people love to kill themselves with. Jack says, I take black acrylic and offset fill it so it looks like a vinyl record.
Oh, that's so smart. That would be
So-
such a
Sure.
good project.
That is a
You shared that on
fantastic
Discord.
idea. Yeah. So your fill setting with offset fill, you're changing with your line interval how close the hatch is to each other, or how close the passing line is to the prior outer circle of that line, because it's one line. So you can set it to like a millimeter, right? Or even 1.5 millimeters, and literally give yourself ridges in that acrylic. That is super freaking smart.
I would like you to repost that picture, Jack. I feel like I've seen it, but I want to see it again.
Yeah, if you have that handy, can you dump that into like random chat or something?
Yeah, Discord, tag me on that one. I want to see that.
I'd love to throw that up on stream for you.
So is this your 6th lens since yesterday? Number 6? 5? Yeah, that's true. 5. Feel like you got it down now?
You know what you get to do when you're done with this laser?
What?
You get to take your calibrations to the next laser and see if they're accurate.
They probably won't be, but maybe. There's no. You'll notice there's no SFX on this list. I just haven't even thought about doing that one yet, but that would be really interesting to see.
It's part of the process.
Yeah, how different those would be. There are some holes up here as well that I have not yet been able to tackle. For example, I'm missing my 300 millimeter UV lens. We've just not done it at all for some reason. Also, we haven't done lens corrections on the vast majority of our CO2 lenses. We've only done the focal distance and spot size for those. And one of the spot sizes is missing for that. So we'll have to go back and get that too. So it's a little patchy, but it is coming together. But the fiber obviously is the one that we use the most. And so it's the most important one for me at least, to feel like we've gotten through it and it's complete. So that's why we're working on that one right now. But yeah, we are at the F63 50 by 50 right now is the one that we're working on. So
it's all part of the process. But what's nice is you have an enormous sample size of lenses. I
Yep.
have an enormous sample size of lenses. Anthony's assortment of lenses is also getting pretty massive. I think at this point,
It's getting
I
there.
think between the three of us, we can draw some pretty interesting conclusions comparing like lens sizes and the differences between them and how those things carry from one laser to the next.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah. I've
lots of
got-
inferences of information to gather from this kind of data.
I have 12 for my fiber alone. We've got 5 UV lenses and then 2, 4, 6, 8 CO2 lenses, a third of which are compound and a third of which are singular, plus the lenses that are actually in the machines right now, which I didn't even count. So we've got a lot. Rhiannon asked me an important question. She said, are the settings for doing the tests going to be different for this lens? And I just wanted to answer it on stream. Yes, they will be, because you're using a smaller lens with a smaller workspace. You're going to have a smaller dot size, which means higher energy density. So you won't need as much power to get the same results out of this lens as you normally would. If you're asking me how much to drop it, I don't have the math in front of me to do that right now, but I would say 10 percentage points, maybe 5, just kind of an off the head guess, and you can adjust as needed, but frequency should be identical. You shouldn't have to change the frequency or the speed for that matter in this particular case. Small guy. Here's Rhiannon's label for this test. Small guy.
I'm gonna withhold my suggestion because you might not need it. But if you're testing field size when you frame it isn't drawing the corners, let me know, and I have a pro tip to help you out.
She nodded.
Okay. Eli says, does anybody know the JP Plus discount code? I'm looking at making another purchase on there. Their black acrylic engraves amazing with a fiber laser. Yeah, it's YLR-ZDF.
Where's Matt when you need him? He literally has one job.
For 15%
He actually posted
off.
later on that he found it in a previous video.
Oh,
Eli
awesome.
had-
All right.
Yeah, I'd gone back and dug it up too. So, but yeah,
Well,
definitely sharing it's a great thing because it helps the channel.
Thank you for asking. Thank you for supporting the channel. And thank you for saving money on your order. Thank you for all the things. And coming back and sharing the code as well. Appreciate it. Hope you get a solid savings on your order, bud.
You can see that card warping as it's going over it.
Yeah, because it's
not-
generating heat, but it's not
Yeah.
dense enough to ablate.
So
Yeah.
Rhiannon just ran into one of the 50 millimeter lens problems, which
You
is
can't
that
get down low enough.
she
can't go low enough.
she can't get the scan head low enough. So I told her to do what we all normally do, which is bring the material closer to the lens. So she's got a couple blocks now, and she's going to use those to raise the material up. So if you're wondering why we're doing it that way, that's why. The scan head will not go closer to the material. And because this is an f = 63 lens, we're looking at just over 2 inches for an approximate focal distance, which is very short. So we're going to start stacking things now. I would put it under the entire assembly. Yeah, like that. Yeah.
If
How
it's
do you
something
not
we know
have a
about around
Z-table?
here, it's 2 inches.
I don't know, dude. I don't own a Z table. I don't have one. Like a single one. I should probably get one, like a little scissor lift one, like a manual
Yeah.
one. Yeah, I just don't have one. I don't know. I've just gone this long without it. It's one of the few things I don't have.
That's hilarious.
I did the opposite for you. I gave you a tower riser to make the problem worse.
Yeah, you did. That's very
My
true.
UV isn't on a riser, but I still can't get low enough to use my f100. So
Damn.
yeah, it's because just the way that the tower's built, it goes down a lot lower at the bottom to brace it.
Yeah.
And it just can't go low enough. So I got
Wouldn't be a
Z
problem on a
table with that
rotary.
one.
Wouldn't be a problem
No,
on a rotary,
no.
but flat engraving, you're stuck.
Yeah.
One thing she should make sure of too is if that wood isn't perfectly flat, if it's
Level.
rocking at all, it may not be level.
Yeah, it's like project board, so it should be good. But yeah, Rhiannon, so what I would do is run it continuously again, and start going up with the crank instead of down. It may be too close, or it might not be close enough. Have you grab the orture bed and literally physically lift it with your hands, like lift the orture bed up? No. Okay.
You're going further. Yeah.
Yep. So you go further away. And if this doesn't work, then you may need to reassess your power. I may have given you a bad value. I might have had you reduce the power too much, which is perfectly reasonable to assume.
I think she might have went right past it, by the way.
Just now?
Yep. Go back.
Kyle says drop it.
Gotta go slow. Super slow.
So at this point, I would raise your power, Rhiannon.
Yeah.
Because I do see the kind of the fog there. You can see the mist forming. See if I can get this to focus.
25.
Very angry at me. Go on, you can do it. Focus. Focus.
Stan came back and said again, thanks for the help. Just cardboard boxed the acrylic of my enclosure. Last question, will it be safe to look through the free mascot OD8 Plus to see the red dot? Yeah, that shouldn't be a problem. The red dot, unless it's directly reflecting into your eyes, shouldn't have any health problems for you. The problem where red dots become a problem, or the situation where red dots become a problem, is when they're directly reflecting into your eye. So you don't want to like point it at a mirror object and then like stand where it's going to directly reflect. You want to look at it from a flat position, not from a reflective position. So look at it from the front, not from the top, if that makes sense, if you can avoid it. Hope that helps. Direct exposure is where the... Oh, there you go. Yeah. See what I mean by the adjustment's going to be so fine that it's easy to blow right past it. Yeah.
I noticed that with my 70 millimeter is like just like even a quarter turn of my knob and I'm in and out of focus.
That's what she said.
Oh.
Yeah, it's like, what is that? Like a millimeter?
Yeah.
Basically a functional usable focus range.
Less, I'd say sub millimeter.
Yeah. And that's why deep engraving with a 50 isn't a great idea. If you got to go down to a 50 to do deep engraving.
All right, so
you need more wattage.
You're going to learn. So Rob's We Do Widgets focal stick is too tall to measure the focal distance. Do you remember what the meniscus is from like high school chemistry?
Yep.
So that's where the lowest point dips. You're going to go over to Chris's workstation and find the clear acrylic ruler, and you're going to set it on the business card and find the meniscus of the lens and record that depth. Might take her a second to find it. I'm going to find it really quick.
I'll give you a meniscus.
Emphasis on the kiss.
Let's see. We got Jason said, is it worth using an X-Tool air purifier if you can vent outside using an inline fan? So you got some things to consider there. The X-Tool air purifier uses consumables in order to filter your air. Depending on what you are trying to purify or filter, you may jam those up really, really quickly. So if you're, for example, engraving nothing but MDF, that's going to create a lot of sticky soot from the glues and stuff that they use in MDF. And that's going to gum up your pre-filter, and it's going to use up your other filters very quickly. And you're going to have to replace those more frequently. If you're doing something like fiber laser engraving coins, you're going to catch a lot of metal in the filter, but you can take it out and knock a lot of that loose metal out.
Yeah.
Carefully with a respirator on so you don't inhale it. but there are risk factors to trying to reuse filters as well. So that's not a conversation we're going to cover right this minute, but it's significantly more cost efficient. And if you're burning something that creates a lot of VOCs or fumes, it is generally safer to vent outside or even purify then vent
Do it from
than
the
it
card.
is to only purify and
You can
recirculate.
move the card.
I mean, you could filter the air and then pump it outside as a courtesy to your neighbors. Like, I have people that walk kind of behind my building where I exhaust. And when I'm doing a lot of wood, you know, it can get a little bit smoky back there.
Because
so,
that's where the focal stick is going to touch when we cut one.
Yeah, I generally vent outside because it's significantly better on cost. It's better on health for you as an individual because most purifiers aren't going to maintain good enough
83.
air quality inside. It's possible that it does, but you need to keep
1, 2,
up
3.
on your filter replacements or it's not going to.
and like Alex mentioned before, you can vaporize materials, which can off-put gases, which an air purifier isn't going to stop gases typically. I don't think. I mean, I don't think it's going to stop if
Well,
you
if
if
it
you
has
did
a
PVC and it created chlorine gas. I don't know. It depends. I guess you'd have to look and see how big.
you would need
how many
filters
microns
rated
it
for that. Yeah.
Yuri's,
So-
Yuri's right too in chat. Yuri's like, filters are expensive. They
Yeah,
are
that too.
So much money, dude.
Yeah. When you're creating gases, a lot of that is usually absorbed by the carbon filter, the activated carbon. But you also have to remember activated carbon, while it doesn't necessarily get clogged up, the pellets that are absorbing the VOCs that are going through it clog the pores of the pellets. So anything that blows past those through the filter is now back into your engraving area and you're breathing that in. You are now the filter. So factor that into your decision making. If you can reasonably vent outside, it is typically the safer option. There are circumstances where a filter, not necessarily a purifier, but an air filter is going to be the only option. Like if you're in a basement of a rental house that doesn't have windows and you're not allowed to drill holes or install a new vent, or you're in a event center and you're in the middle of a showroom or something, which that also brings into other safety concerns, but
Right.
now you're limited to using that air filter setup instead of venting, right? So hope that helps in your decision making, but be safe.
Brianna's like, it's so tiny.
That's what she said.
Got him.
Looks like she got the corners too, which is surprising, actually.
Yeah. Yep. They're definitely there.
So can you leave it on that screen for a moment?
Yep.
So my tip for those of you who are listening and watching and following along, if you have a situation ever where you're looking to calibrate your lens and you put in the suggested percentage value of your field to test, and you find when framing that it's not framing out the corners, it's just framing out the middle of the edges of the box, but it's leaving out the most outer parts of the corners, that means that your laser is trying to output a bigger scale percentage than the lens is capable of putting out. So it's not scaling things down enough to meet the size of the lens, is essentially what that means. So what you need to do is reduce the field size on that first page of the calibration screen until when you frame it, you're framing the entire shape. And it's roughly the size that you're looking for. So if you're, for example, doing a 70 millimeter lens and it's not framing out the corners and the box is humongous, you want to drop that size down till it's about maybe 50 millimeters in size to get that roughly 85% size. And once it dips down to the point where you have those corners and it's roughly the right size for your suggested test size, that's when you burn it, because then you're going to get the most accurate results. Or any results, because if you don't burn the corners, you're not going to get anything.
Yeah. Apparently, Rob says he has extra short variable height focal sticks.
Yeah.
Nice.
When we did our first test stream, when me and you were doing these, when we suggested the thought of doing a 70 or 50 millimeter lens, he's like, I got you covered, boo.
Yeah, sure he did. That's definitely Rob's attitude.
Yep.
Well, we're at 2.5 hours, guys. We've got roughly, 20 to 30 minutes left in today's stream, giving me a little time to collect myself before I head home. So if you guys have anything else you want to talk about today, or if you know somebody else with a question, feel free to forward them to the live. I feel like so many people in our communities have so many questions, and then they miss us when we're live, which is unfortunate because we're right here. Like, I'm ready to answer your questions right now. I have the time. So if you do see any questions or anything, that have been unattended out in our various communities, whether you're on the Facebook group or the Discord or even the LMA, wherever you might find yourself, drop a comment. Be like, hey, catch them live. They're live right now or something like that. Let people know what we're doing, because we are here to help, and we can't help people if they don't know that we're here. So that's always very appreciated.
If you haven't done it yet, we'd also love it if you could hit subscribe, because we know, statistically speaking, many of you aren't subscribed.
It's about 94%.
Yeah. And also, we would love it if you hit that like button, because it lets people know that the content's great. And it helps it get in front of others who might get value out of this content and otherwise wouldn't see it.
Yeah.
That's wild that the percentage is that high on such a specific, like, niche kind of subject as, like, lasers. And
Also, fun fact, we get more female viewership on lives than we do in video content.
Interesting.
Yeah, it goes from one female viewer to like 3.
Oh my goodness.
No, I'm just kidding. It is a fairly small percentage of females in this industry. So you guys rock
I haven't
out.
seen Laura yet today. Has she been?
I saw Laura. She popped in. She was busy and had to go, but she wanted to say hi.
Yeah, she popped in and out.
Here's a question that I can't read because it's too tiny on my screen, but it looks like a question, or at least a statement of some sort. It's
Stacey
a big one.
Says, hi all, great show. Been listening and learning. Thank you. New to these big lasers, and I have an F1 bundle on the way. So excited, especially for the air purifier it comes with. Definitely a game changer. Yeah, just make sure you keep up with filter changes and make sure you're not burning anything that creates hazardous fumes.
Yeah.
That might not be absorbed by the activated carbon.
I know we were literally just talking shit about filters in lieu of like exhaust existing, but specifically for use with the F1, that X-Tool extractor has worked really, really well for me in the time that I've had it. So you should be excited for it, and I would have some confidence in that to do its job if you need to use it, if you absolutely cannot exhaust outside. Of course, keep your mind on what Kyle is warning you against here. It's not going to save you from hazardous gases or acids and things like that. So do be careful, but it does do its job fairly well.
Have you seen their new filter purifier setup?
I think that's what Jason was talking about, is the purifier versus the filter.
So the original one that came with the F1 combo, that was a 3-stage filter setup, right, Alex?
Yes.
I think the new one's like a 6-stage or something.
Wow.
It's like significantly more filtering.
Sure.
Now, granted, again, all the same warnings are still in place. It just means that you have more scrubbing happening from front to back.
It might be a little less stanky.
Yeah, but keep in mind too, your filters are a footprint, right? So if you have the same size box and it's filled with the same volume of filters, at some point those filters are going to need to get replaced. So just make sure you're ready to swap them. If you're using it for business or you're prepping to use it for business, you're probably going to want to keep a set on hand, just so you're not waiting a week or two to get them in. Because then obviously if you can't laser stuff in your shop without the filter, you're stuck, right?
Yeah.
So your customers are going to be waiting or walking away.
I know that the live streams aren't for everyone, but Jonathan is down here. I just saw saying it's his first time tuning in, and we covered so much content. Per a previous video, a Venn diagram of lasers and material or compatibility would be awesome. Thanks for what you do. And that is something that I've wanted to do for a while, and it's on the list. It's kind of a back burner list item because we do have just like so much that we're attending to. But if you need laser resources, go to lasereverything.net. We have so much there, and it's all available for free, brought to you by our members over at the Laser Master Academy. It is an impossibly large amount of work to maintain all of that, and the people that fund the channel over there make that happen. But I know the live streams, I'm getting off topic, I know the live streams aren't everybody's favorite content. They are long. A lot of the time we're having technical issues or we're goofing off or whatever. But there is so much info that just comes up spontaneously, jam-packed into those live streams. And we have hundreds of them, multiple hundreds, if not thousands now, hours of content in the form of live streams, where we're mostly just answering people's questions and working on some project. And it's really, really good information. So please dig through that, as well as our other video libraries, because there is some good stuff in there. Plus the podcast, Laser Source podcast.
TJ brings up a great point. So when venting outside, also think about CFM being exhausted. Might need makeup air so you're not sucking back carbon monoxide from the water heater or HVAC. So I actually saw a YouTube short from a plumber last night, the night before, where you actually, if you're using like a gas water heater, essentially the heat as it escapes the heating pipe that goes up the center of the water heater and goes up to the exhaust pipe, there's a cone essentially that sits on top of your water heater, and that catches the gas as it leaves, but it also sucks some air from the room out and up into the pipe with it. Mm-hmm. Now what that does is, if you're sucking back air through that and the water heater is on and heating, you can actually melt the plastic fittings on the top of your water heater, not just dump poisonous gas into your space. So there's a lot of other factors that happen with that too. You could, if you're using like PEX, for example, you could straight up melt your water pipe going in or out of your water tank and just start dumping a crap load of water into your basement or living space.
Kyle, you're not going to sit here and tell me this is right?
What?
The scale she just got from the lens correction. I know we're correcting for scale after the fact, but it's telling us that the x-axis scale adjustment is now 179%.
No. I'm not telling you it's right. I told you it's really weird with edge case lenses. So if you have a really strangely long focal distance 300 or really short focal distance lenses, there's weird edge cases when it comes to scale.
So
but the bulge the bulge, the skew, and the trapezoid, as long as they were measured and input correctly, shouldn't be a problem. You just have to correct scale.
So continue and correct scale as usual.
Yep.
All right, you heard the man.
So yeah, TJ, great point. One thing I will add,
40.
CFM is not everything. You also need to take into account that a standard axial fan, if you're trying to suck air from one end of the house to the other, may not have the ability to suck as well as it can just move air. So
the static pressure on those is not great.
Yeah. So think like axial fan is like a box fan that you'd throw in a window in an open house in the summer, versus centrifugal fan is more like a vacuum cleaner. It can suck and like hold itself against a carpet, for example, versus a box fan can be thrown out of a window by a gust of air blowing against the side of the house, even though it's literally trying to suck that air in faster than the wind can blow it. So you're also dealing with that. It doesn't mean you need one of those stupid clamshell blowers, because those are stupid and annoying, but and loud. But there are newer centrifugal fans that take the same external form factor as an axial fan, but uses centrifugal science to essentially be more efficient and create more static pressure or suction against what you're pulling, in order to be more efficient for some circumstances. So take that into account. Not all fans are created equal. CFM doesn't mean everything. You can get a 1,000 CFM fan as an axial fan, but if you put it in the wrong circumstances, it's going to move zero air, literally.
Yep.
It's going to sit there and chop the air and cavitate and make noise and piss you off when your lenses get dirty from floating through the air and sticking to them. So there's the other side of that. Thanks for popping by, Rob. We appreciate you.
See, Rob. Do you see this box?
You mean that rectangle?
Yeah.
Yeah, dude. I'm telling you, scale gets really weird when it comes to strange lens sizes.
Yeah.
And I think part of the scale oddity of output also has to do with the skew and trapezoid factors.
Mhm.
So if there's a lot of correction on skew and trapezoid, or just the right number, it squishes it into a rectangle, or blows it out. I've actually had lens corrections that after shrinking the field down to get the corners to fit, and I actually ended up having some weird trapezoid problem. It caused the scale to blow the entire engraving edge out when I went to go do the lens size testing for rescaling at the end. I ended up having to scale it down like 50% size comparatively to what it was at.
Yeah, I'm looking at the bulge and trap now. Are a little larger than I'm used to seeing. Do you guys typically get one for skew? Because I've gotten one for skew all the way down. Not a single one of these lenses has had to be corrected for skew in any way, fiber or not fiber. And I thought that was kind of weird, but it's so consistent. And I don't know if Lightburn's just messing up, or if there really is just that's like an edge case correction, and usually we don't need it.
I had one lens that came with skew correction from the vendor, but when I did my manual correction, it didn't have any skew, and I could not see a perceivable difference between the two.
Mm-hmm. Yep, just keep going.
So I'm not sure why that is, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, do you see that when you do your corrections, or are you getting skew corrections?
Oh, all of mine are one as well.
Yeah, okay.
But I also haven't found a need to change that. So
yeah, sure. That's fine.
It could just be that we're getting lucky on that. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't care if it's broken or not. I just want to make sure I'm not the only one.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I wonder if so basically with our head arrangement these days, right? The mirrors are perpendicular to each other in terms of axis. maybe the skew is for correcting if they aren't.
Sure.
I don't know, because I don't I've never seen like a super old one. So
Yeah, that could make a difference.
just the theory.
It may no longer be relevant.
Yeah, could be like old hardware consideration on that or something.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I mentioned it. Just going back to what my TJ said, but yes, air inlet is important. If you're not replacing the air that you're trying to suck out, you're actually artificially limiting the CFM going out of your thing, and you're also reducing the available suction for your laser as well. So I'm in a basement where the door goes out to my garage, and I have an open air vent in my garage. I'll crack the door when I'm running my laser so that I get directly free flowing air to replace.
Yeah, if you don't have any air to replace the air you're pumping out, then you have a vacuum, and that's not helpful for removing fumes.
Yeah, especially with newer houses where literally the goal of the house for being energy efficient is to be as well sealed as possible. Whereas they'll even go to lengths of spraying like sealant into the air to seal all the little tiny micro cracks in between the pieces of wood in your framing. You absolutely need to make sure that you have an air inlet.
Yeah, I'd love to see a system set up where you are not only exhausting outside, but also drawing air from outside. So you'd have like two connections. Like, let's just say, for example, the OhmTech, right? You know, you've got the hole on the side for your fan that they kind of put there. Like, what if it had a second hole on the other side, and you literally had like air coming in from outside, moving through the engraving chamber, and then exiting out the other side back outdoors, especially if you're in a like a temperature controlled or environment controlled kind of area. Then you're not just pumping, like, for example, your AC or your heat directly out of your house. Being able to like draw that air from outside or from some other external source. I feel like that would be like a really handy kind of way to innovate on the exhaust systems that these larger lasers are using.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and that's another factor for pricing too, because if you're engraving in extreme climates where you're dealing with negative temperatures for 4 months of the year, or incredibly hot temperatures like 110 or 120 in the summer, you're looking at increased energy costs because you're dumping that energy right out your wall.
Yeah.
But that's a good point. Also, ideally, by the way, your air inlet should not be in the same window as your air exhaust.
Right. Then you just
I don't think I need to explain why, but you don't want your air coming from your exit going into your inlet.
especially in like an open system, unlike what I was describing. Like that CO2 would be like a closed system, but if it's an open system where you're exchanging air and you and the laser are sharing that air, that would be particularly bad. Also,
ideally,
goodbye
maybe a
to
different wall.
Goodbye to Christina Mazzer for now, but we will see you in the next one. Thanks for stopping by.
Yeah, appreciate you. Ideally, your air inlet will be coming from like another wall of the house or business, so that the air that's being exhausted is at least physically separated by a corner of the building, because it helps prevent that sediment and soot and fume from coming directly back in. So,
we have a question from Tanis if we want to tackle that.
yes, there it is. Hi, what are the best settings for cutting titanium sheet? I've experimented with everything, and it's always going too hot and not cutting good. I have a 60 watt Mopa, 0.8 millimeter titanium G2 sheet. Well, for starters, you're cutting with a Galvo. So you're going to have suboptimal settings no matter what you do, because you really want airflow. titanium is a very reactive material. So no matter what, it's going to seem like you're throwing material everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
If you're cutting through it, you're also going to want it raised up off of your laser bed. Because if it's not, it's fighting against you. You need some open air underneath the material in order for it to separate and effectively cut through.
And I'd say like positive air blowing down on the cut too. Like if you have air assist, some sort of an air assist blowing on it, because titanium's a weird metal, and it really, like, the more power you feed into it, like, it gets really messy. So to help minimize that, I'd say having an air assist, I think, would help a lot, just to have that air blowing things away, hopefully toward an exhaust.
I think a big problem with that is, like, the titanium is very laser weldable. So if you're not removing the material that you are ablating from the area during your cutting process, you're just going to re-weld it back into place in a very messy way, which is not ideal. So that could definitely help. Also, we have a video called, like, Gold Cutting Secrets or something like that on the channel. It's pretty old. It's kind of from, like, my old days on YouTube. But it has some really good tips for cutting metal materials with a galvo laser, and I would go check it out. We talk about things like, increasing the cut width, so using, like, a filled vector shape instead of a line. We talk about, yes, like Kyle's mentioning, using wobble if you are doing a line cut, using that wobble, which can help displace some of that material so that you're not re-welding it. Things like that can really make a big difference, especially if you're not doing them or doing them poorly. So definitely go check out that video too for a longer recap, more than we have time for today, on how to cut through metal materials, because there are a lot of factors, and a lot of that will directly apply to titanium, even though the video is about gold.
Yep. Awesome sauce.
Yeah, titanium's
that
a
helps.
pain. I would say try to keep your power levels fairly moderate, and just take time and try and get some air in there to blow that out, like Alex and I said, just to get that material out of the way. So
if you don't have, can't afford, or can't find an air assist for a galvo laser that you like, there are some options out there, but some of them are better than others. A easy solution, it's not even necessarily the least expensive solution, but an easy solution is to get, like, one of those electric dusters. Like, I have the DataVac, but you don't even need to go that expensive. They make really crappy, like, $20 Chinese ones you can get on Amazon, and literally just charge the battery on that and just blow the engraving area with it while it's cutting. I mean, that would be, like, the cheapest way to do it, besides, like, straight up canned air. And that will give you, some, if not all, of the same effect for a very, very low cost and no setup. Of course, you have to stand there or somehow rig it to sit there while you're doing the cutting, but it's better than nothing, and it's a brainless solution to that problem that you can get into for a very low cost.
Smart.
Absolutely.
Rhiannon's just making her final adjustments here to what's probably going to be the last lens of the day.
The little baby lens.
Yeah, she's doing the red dot alignment now.
Yeah.
I know, it's very small.
So how are you guys aligning it? Are you doing the dead center method, or are you staying just outside of the engrave?
Personally, I like to go just outside of the line. So I like having them parallel and touching, but not overlapping. That way, I find that especially useful when doing jewelry, like rings or necklaces and things like that, because if I can just barely see the laser touching the edge, not the whole fat thing trying to, like, reflect off the metal and stuff, just the edge barely touching, I know exactly what parts of that jewelry are going to be marked and what parts aren't. Whereas with, like the center, the straddle method, as I call it, you're not exactly sure where that line's going to go. It's going to fall somewhere inside the laser, and that's just not precise enough for me to do those really small high-value items. With the outside method, I find it's much easier for me to pinpoint exactly where that laser is going to touch. And you could say the same for the inside method if you wanted to go inside the laser marked line too, but that relies on having more laser touching the potentially reflective material instead of less. So I really do like the outside. I find that the most convenient and easy to utilize for me, but it is a personal preference. I don't think there's a wrong answer. People are going to do what they're comfortable with, and this is one of the few areas where I would make the argument that you can do it however you want to do it as long as it works for you, and there's not a wrong answer.
Yeah, I agree.
What about you guys? How do you end up setting up your reds?
I try and get my red dot. So it's particularly on the bigger more normal size lenses, I find that I can get them centered, which is what I prefer. Particularly when I'm doing it the method you guys are doing, where you're white marking on black, it makes it a lot easier to see. Because then I know, even if I'm off in where I'm visually seeing the red light because of reflections or whatever, I'm going to be fairly close. But if I rain on the outside or the inside edge more so, I find that I'm personally off, and that's mostly because of my vision.
Sure.
I know
for you, it's easier to see the large red target rather than trying to make assumptions about
find the edge,
the outside of it. Yeah.
Right. I have a hard time with finding the edge with the way my vision works, my glasses, the way glare works, and being nearsighted and all that. I have a hard time with it. So the way my eyes work, that's what works for me.
Certainly not like to say that the way that I'm doing it doesn't break down either. On a lot of lasers, especially ones that have the red dot built into the source, they're not always focused to the same point. So you'll have a sharp in focus fiber, for example, but your red dot at that point is not as thin or as tight as it could be. Right, so actually going out of focus with your marking laser is what brings the red laser into focus. And when that is the case, determining what or where the outside edge of that beam can be is going to become a lot more frustrating when you're dealing with a fat out of focus laser instead of a nice sharp one like the one that we're looking at now.
Yeah, true.
In which case, I'd make the argument that Kyle's method is better, because then you're relying on the at least the body of the laser rather than the edge.
Yeah.
What about you, Anthony? How do you do it?
I used to straddle it, but now I've kind of shifted toward just tracing the outside line of the mark with the red dot. And to me, it just kind of having to get into like some tighter spots and do some really small engravings, it's just worked out better for me. So
yep. Cool. I'm really interested to see Rhiannon's results from this one, because I think that all of the ones that we've done so far are within like a really, really small margin of error, and I'm kind of wondering if Kyle will qualify this as similar enough that you could use them all for the same, or if they're different enough that Kyle would make the argument that I should be doing it for each individual lens. So I'm really interested to see how he ends up falling on that. Granted, 4 of the 5 of these that we've done are all the same field size, but if the 50 is even remotely close, I think that would be something really interesting to see. So,
so the way CloudRay does it is they do a core file for each lens size that they sell, and that's the generic one that they send out. So if they sell a machine that has a 110 lens in it, they send their generic 110 core
specifically
file
for the red dot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because we were talking about that yesterday. That was one of the topics we were talking about, was whether or not you had to redial that in for every laser or not. So I'm curious to see, because you made the argument yesterday that, if they're close enough, then it's probably going to be the same for all of them because of the way the laser is configured. But if there are variances between them, then you may end up wanting to do each individual lens. So I'm curious what you will feel when you look at this data that I'm looking at.
We gonna find out.
Yep. I'm going to share it with you in just a minute here before we wrap up for the day. Call it a bitch. That usually works for me.
TJ says, thoughts on laser costs next year for the new president? I know it's a hard question to answer, lots of variables. Yeah, so there's a lot of talk of import duties changing and stuff coming in from China to the U.S. getting prohibitively taxed based on value. And ultimately, we're not policymakers, right? So we don't know what's going to happen. For all we know, they're going to change their minds or adjust how they do it or double it or half it, or maybe they come to some deal. Who knows? But if what they're claiming is going to be accurate, we're probably going to see a price increase on machines. So if you're running a business and you have funds left for writing off on your taxes for hardware, talk to your tax professional, and maybe now's a good time to get an order in.
Yeah.
Kyle's taking the high road on this. I will share my opinion, not a fact, but I'll share my opinion that there will be a price increase. It will be severe, and it's going to shake a lot of the people in this industry that are used to buying goods from China at a certain price point. This doesn't just affect lasers. This affects everything. This affects blanks. This affects receipt paper. This affects your lunch that you eat on a lunch break. You think all that food is made in America? Think again. Prices for everything are going to go up. Tariffs are paid by consumers, which is us. And it's going to be especially bad with stuff being imported from China. So I'll be the doomsayer here. Kyle's keeping an open mind. I'll be the doomsayer and say brace your butts, because it's going to be rough. I think some people are going to get rocked. I don't think a lot of people see it coming, and it's going to be heavy. That's as much as I'll say about it. I don't want to get political, but we're in for a good shakeup, I think, as far as what people are used to versus how things will be going forward once we start seeing tariffs implemented.
Another thing that
is it good?
I think might be a factor as well is I think we're going to see a lot of shipping forwarders and companies that deal in importing, exporting in other countries that see an opportunity in this where they're going to be able to
scalp,
buy and sell buy low from China, sell a little bit higher from where they are, and be able to still come in below the tariffed cost landed in the US because they're from another country. Even factor again now double shipping potential because
don't forget
you're shipping it twice. Yeah, so that's a factor, right? So this could be a boon for somebody to get in on the ground floor of importing and exporting in a different country. Who knows?
Anthony's always wanted to be a scalper. Now he has an excuse.
Savage.
All right, here you go. What do you think of this, Kyle? What do you make of this? So this top row here, these are our 50 millimeter red dot adjustments that we've made. The four below it are our 4 different 110 millimeter lenses. What do you think?
Can you highlight? Wait, so which one's which?
This is the 50 that's highlighted, and these 4 are the 2 Ronar Smith and 2 Cloud Ray style 110 millimeter lenses. So 50 at the top, Hundies at the bottom.
I think they're fairly close, and it could be subjective. But with the offset, it's hard to say. You're probably using a beam combiner there and not an integrated red dot.
Good to know. I think I will have Rhiannon continue to do the red dot adjustments as we go.
The problem is we're talking hundredths of a millimeter at this point.
Yeah.
So will the average person be able to identify that? If their vision is sucky like mine, maybe not. But if you spend enough time doing the blockage trick where you're blocking part of the beam and double checking it, if you're super fine tuning it, those little micro adjustments, if you're being accurate and they are different, then likely your red dot isn't perfectly aligned to your fiber, which means it's not an integrated one. It is a beam combiner, which is totally fine. That's why we have offset.
Yeah.
Well,
our very last thing that we're doing here today, I misread, I think, the variable focal stick, and so I'm having Rhiannon just measure one that I put. I actually put like a question mark next to this 178 because I just don't remember if I read that correctly or not. So I've just asked her to quickly do a focus test for us so that we can find out if it's truly 178 or not. Because that would put them all, I mean, they're all pretty tight, but a millimeter difference between these 4 110 lenses, or at least 3 of them, I mean, that's pretty substantial. You can mess that up. You know, if you do 180 on one that you should have done 177 on, you're going to see a degradation of the quality of the mark, for sure.
Your scale is going to be out, too. If you're 3 millimeters higher than you should be on something that's supposed to be dimensionally accurate, you're going to be off.
Yeah, I mean, with a 50-watt laser, right, 3 millimeters is your Z marking discrepancy. I mean, that's a huge difference. So that is what she is taking care of now, just so we can make sure that we have that right. But this is probably going to be the stopping point for today. It's been a long day, guys. We're streaming for 3 hours now since we fixed the initial audio problem, and we wasted like an hour and a half on that. And then we streamed a little bit before that. So we've just been going all day here today. We've still got more to do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 more lenses, Rhiannon. In case you want to stop, you're getting there. So we'll probably be back tomorrow. Let people know that they can get their questions and answered questions. They can get their questions answered live right here with us tomorrow. We're gonna be here all day, doing the same exact thing. I'm trying to let Rhiannon get some experience doing this because this is such a vital part of what we're doing, and since she doesn't require that much babysitting, it just means I'm pretty much sitting here hoping that you guys will come and ask your questions. So please come, bring some questions with you tomorrow. Let people know that we're going to be taking questions tomorrow. If you see something that's been sitting, or somebody that desperately needs help, or somebody that might benefit from talking to us while we're live, let them know that we'll be doing a stream tomorrow. I will try to get the link up early so that you guys have it and you're available. Do you think you might join us tomorrow, Anthony, or are you sick of this yet?
No, I'm not sick of it at all. I'm sure you guys are probably getting sick of me.
Never.
But yeah, I'd be down, man.
I can listen to that,
get a chance
that chocolate rain. You got that chocolate rain voice, dude.
Oh.
Chocolate rain.
But yeah, I have some cups I have to do, and because of my car issues, I haven't had a chance. So I got to get that wrapped up, and then
Were you supposed to do that today? Naughty! You didn't even do that while we were live.
I got the parts and stuff, but I had to meet a lady here to have her pick up some merchandise I engraved on yesterday.
Word.
And so I just had to be here anyway, so I figured I'd jump on stream and hang
out.
So.
We might see some action then on Anthony's end tomorrow. And Kyle, will we have you back tomorrow, you think?
I'll be here.
All right, good. That means that I don't need to rely on my own personal knowledge of lasers in order to survive tomorrow's live stream. So that is excellent news.
I want to hear from Rhiannon. With Rhiannon's laser knowledge prior to the last couple days and now these couple days, does Rhiannon feel like she's grasping things quicker and faster now? Because I'm noticing a big change in the amount of time it takes to go from lens to lens now. It's much shorter. She's going way faster. And how confident she feels.
I was telling Alex yesterday that my least confident area is just doing the initial focus. And then the lens correction and stuff feels pretty easy because I'm just measuring the things. But I don't know. I'm grasping things more and more. I think part of my struggle is just with like what things are called, or yeah, I don't know, just remembering lens numbers, stuff like that. So, but that's probably gotten better.
It's a lot. I think the stuff that you end up having a hard time with is just stuff that requires repetition.
Yeah.
It's just repeated exposure over and over and over again. We don't
Practice.
just know all these numbers because we're mega nerds. I know that the 110 lens has approximate focal distance of 160 millimeters because I've said it 50,000 fucking times. So it's just, I think that kind of stuff will just come with repetition. But you seem a lot more confident around the lasers. You certainly don't seem as scared of a galvanometer as you used to. So, yeah, dude, you're killing it.
Resin does have a good point. Don't lie, we are mega nerds.
Yeah, I mean, we are, but that doesn't mean we need to advertise it or, make it worse than it already is, for sure.
Love you too, Resin. Thanks.
Anyway, guys, I'm going to call it here, I think. I'm busted. My voice is just, wrecked. I don't know how you guys have talked for so long. I feel like you've done the majority of the talking, the two of you, and I've just been picking my nose, and my voice is still hoarse. So, I'm good. But, guys, remember, don't forget to smash the like button if you got value out of this live stream. It really does help. It really does. And if you haven't, please consider subscribing. Subscribing is so important for the channel, and only 94% of our viewers, 94% of the people that watch our videos are not subscribed. So go ahead and click the subscribe button so you get notified the next time we post a video or go live. And if you want to support the channel, head over to masters.lasereverything.net to join the Laser Master Academy. It's an amazing community of people. We've got tons of people there that love to help with issues. They love picking apart these kind of problems and helping to figure them out. We share photos and videos and stories and warnings and settings and all kinds of stuff. We've got a bunch of great free laser resources over at lasereverything.net. And if you want to find out any other ways that you can support the channel, you can find that list at lasereverything.net/support. When you're done with all of that, if you still have some time left over before bed, go to beamitupLasertape.com, grab some of this laser tape we've been using all day from Mr. Anthony here, and check out his YouTube channel too. It's Beam Up Laser Works. There's a link to it on the homepage of our channel down at the bottom.
Appreciate that. Yeah, I've had a dry spell. I got to get some stuff out. I'm getting the itch.
We're
Yeah,
not
dude.
just pimping it because we love Anthony. We do love Anthony, but we also love his tape.
Yeah, I definitely read that wrong, by the way. That was not right at all. We got to go in here and fix it. I thought that was 178. Nope, read it backwards. It's 182. My bad. 182. All right, guys, with that,
That's an even bigger discrepancy. Jesus.
I know, yeah. With that, guys, more of this tomorrow. We won't be doing 110 lenses all day. We'll actually have a variety of lenses, so we'll see how Rhiannon tackles that challenge and a whole bunch more on Laser Everything. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you in the next one.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.